Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Barbara Mullenix. Have you done everything right in your life? Most likely, many will say yes. The lives of the figures in today's story resemble a madhouse. Since its inception, alcohol has remained the most commonly used psychoactive substance. It is not surprising that alcoholic drinks destroy families, destinies, and even lives. Barbara Mullenix was born on May 29, 1950, in Munich, Germany. She spent her childhood there and was described as an ordinary child from a family slightly above the middle class. By the age of 18, Barbara got married. She always dreamed of starting a family, but from the very beginning, it was far from ideal. In particular, the strong-willed Barbara turned out to be far from the ideal wife her boyfriend wanted. She was very hot-tempered. After that, she moved to the USA. In total, she went through 3 marriages, all of which ended in divorce. After her early relationships, Barbara had 2 sons, who had already left home by the time of that events. Only her 17-year-old daughter, Rachel, remained living with her. Rachel was born during Barbara's 3rd marriage to Bruce, a man who turned out to be 9 years younger than Barbara. The entire family settled in Oakland, Oklahoma, USA. Bruce was initially attracted to Barbara's vibrant personality, but just as quickly as it drew him in, it began to repel him. A typical cycle of Barbara's relationship problems began to repeat itself. Rachel, born in 1989, became a guiding star for Barbara, as she had always wanted to have a daughter. During this period, her daughter was treated like a princess, and she willingly took advantage of this. Rachel was given the largest bedroom, the best outfits, and extravagant parties for her birthdays. At a young age, she convinced her parents to enroll her in a special private school that required attendance only once a week, allowing her to enjoy a relatively easy life. Rachel was a good student, very athletic and active. She participated in inter-school basketball championships, attended ballet classes, and practiced gymnastics. However, despite all of this, her parents faced major problems. Barbara struggled with alcoholism for a long time, and after Rachel turned 10, her drinking became noticeably worse. According to Rachel's memories, Barbara became a severe alcoholic who verbally and physically attacked her husband and daughter whenever she drank. Once she touched a glass, she would become aggressive. She could grab them by the hair and hit them. This resulted in police being called to their home several times due to domestic violence. The first incident occurred in 2002 when the police found 12-year-old Rachel crying on the street, showing a bite mark allegedly left by her mother. The police reports indicated several bite marks on her back that the girl clearly could not have inflicted on herself. However, she later admitted that she made up the story and asked the authorities not to press charges against her mother. She probably didn't want Barbara to suffer. After such outbursts of aggression, Barbara would often apologize to her family members. When she wasn't drinking, even her ex-husbands described her as kind and sociable. However, all this changed radically once Barbara started drinking again. Her relationships with men fell apart for the same reasons, either due to her alcoholism or the aggression stemming from her difficult temperament. When Rachel turned 13, Bruce, tired of the situation, decided to end the marriage and moved to Newport Beach, California, in search of work. Barbara then decided to move to Tampa, Florida. Typical divorce proceedings soon arose. It was difficult for they to agree on many things. They didn't want to prolong the process. Ultimately, they suggested that their daughter choose with whom she wanted to stay. This was a difficult period for Reiki, as the answer to such questions became too much for her to handle. Her parents ended up in different states, making it difficult for her to visit either parent. In the end, Rachel chose to stay with her mother and moved to Tampa, and her father had to pay child support. This decision shocked Barbara's friends, who were aware of the addiction and believed that this story could not end well. Exactly, the first incidents of trouble soon followed. In 2004, the Tampa police received a call from the home where Barbara and Rachel lived. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, they found a woman in tears. She was very nervous and shaking all over. There were injuries on her body, some of which she clearly could not have inflicted on herself. Barbara was reluctant to communicate with the police, answering questions in monosyllables, but from her words, it was clear that these injuries were inflicted by her daughter, Rachel. At the time of the police's arrival, the teenager had run away from home. One of the arriving officers called Rachel on her mobile phone. She immediately answered and admitted that there had been a quarrel with her mother before leaving. They had fought, and after that, Rachel hung up. In response to subsequent calls, she refused to answer. Ultimately, there was no formal complaint. Barbara refused to press charges against her daughter, and the case was hushed up. Incidents provoked earlier by Barbara in fits of alcoholic aggression ended in exactly the same way. During this period, Barbara continued to drink, and it seemed that the situation was worsening. She did not work, and they lived on benefits and alimony from Rachel's father, but there was clearly not enough money. By 2005, all this led to the fact that she could not pay the rent, which was high. When they were notified of this and given a day to pack, Rachel called her father in Newport Beach and asked if he could shelter her and her mother for a while until Barbara could recover from another binge and get back on her feet. Bruce doubted that contacting his ex-wife again was a good idea, but there was no other way out. Rachel was very convincing and used a trick. She told her father that if he could not shelter them both, they would be forced to look for other housing and would not go to him. Apparently, Bruce really wanted his daughter to come to him, so he agreed to these conditions. Rachel later admitted that she understood that without her, her mother would slide into a marginal lifestyle completely and have no way out. In the hope of saving her mother, she made this decision from the beginning. Barbara understood perfectly well that her ex-husband would be against it, so she was grateful to her daughter for her help. After receiving permission from Bruce, both packed their things and went to California. Newport Beach is now one of the richest and most prosperous communities in the United States, located south of Los Angeles. It has many beaches and premium real estate. Bruce owned an apartment there. In such areas, the crime rate is usually low, and violent attacks are committed extremely rarely, as criminal elements typically seek to profit. Unfortunately, with Barbara's arrival, the situation clearly became tense, which greatly upset Bruce. Despite the fact that the former spouses lived in separate rooms, they almost immediately began to quarrel. For Rachel, this move became an excellent opportunity to get to know the social life of the elite area of America. In any case, she and Barbara were focused on succeeding in the film industry to become famous. Barbara had already taken the first steps toward this dream. She got a job as an assistant on a set, actively attended castings, and made acquaintances. Everything went on as usual until May 2006, when the 17-year-old girl met a young man at a party. He was described as a quiet, athletic guy from a good family, good-natured and hardworking. During this period, he worked full-time, supported himself, was focused on his career and family. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed between them, and soon Rachel introduced him to her family. From the very beginning, the 4-year age difference worried both her mother and father, but after getting to know the young man better, they saw that their daughter had chosen a decent guy who treated her well. They hoped that Rachel would choose this good young man. However, Barbara soon began to exhibit flashes of jealousy. It seemed as though she felt offended by the guy because he was taking up all of Rachel's free time. Rachel practically no longer devoted herself to her relationship with her boyfriend and pushed her dreams about Hollywood into the background. Now, it became obvious that Rachel was not interested in work. Hormones had completely turned her head. Barbara continued to pursue her acting career and even landed a small role in the series CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. The character appeared in one of the episodes in a secondary role, and Barbara was waiting for new opportunities. Considering the age difference between the young couple, Rachel needed official permission from her parents to engage in a relationship with him. However, she was skilled at manipulating her mother and father, often giving them ultimatums. This is likely how she coerced them into signing a document granting their permission. From that point on, the couple could calmly meet. With the high school girl always having this permission to prevent her boyfriend from facing any legal issues regarding the corruption of minors, as specified by law. At the same time, Rachel managed to negotiate very favorable conditions for this agreement. The only stipulation was a curfew set at 1 a.m. However, as practice showed, even this became too serious a restriction for the rebellious Rachel. On August 31, 2006, Rachel accidentally fell asleep at her boyfriend's house and missed curfew. Barbara was furious. Unable to reach her daughter by phone, she went to Ian Allen's house at around 2 o'clock in the morning. Once there, she began knocking on the door, screaming and raising everyone's alarms. She forcibly pulled Rachel out of the house and forbade her from seeing Ian. This was shocking for Rachel, but for a while, Ian and Rachel decided to take a break. 10 days after this conflict, Rachel wrote in her diary that her relationship with her mother had deteriorated to its historical minimum. She openly called her mother a psychopath and reported that she heard threats from Barbara every day. Rachel expressed regret for not leaving for Tampa with her father back then and hoped that Barbara would calm down so that things could return to normal. However, things did not improve. On September 13, 2006, a yacht left Newport Harbor, and the captain noticed something suspicious in the water. He saw a large, tightly sealed cardboard box floating past the ship and thought to himself that it looked like a coffin. Pushing away dark thoughts, he pulled out the suspicious object only to discover the body of a woman wrapped in a bloody sheet. He reported this gruesome find to the Coast Guard. When police officers arrived on the scene, they counted 52 stab wounds to the face, neck, upper body, and back. The most disturbing detail was a knife sticking out of one eye, along with another smaller bloody knife wrapped in the same sheet, which still had remnants of the victim on it. A third knife was simply discarded in the box. All three were ordinary kitchen tools from the same set. The body was sent for an autopsy, where the medical examiner found that 2 of the numerous stab wounds were fatal, having cut the jugular vein and carotid artery. Each of these wounds could have killed the victim within minutes without immediate medical assistance, leaving no chance of survival. The examiner concluded that she had been killed on the evening of September 12, less than a day before the yacht owner's call. The victim remained unidentified until the medical examiner discovered breast implants, each assigned a serial number at the factory, which could be used similarly to dental records. This led the police to identify the victim as Barbara Mullenix. They quickly located the deceased. Detectives went to the house where Barbara lived with her daughter and ex-husband. When the investigators arrived, the house was empty. They began inspecting the territory, and by that time, Bruce had driven up to the house. He stated that he had been on a business trip for several days, about a 2-hour drive from home, and had returned less than an hour ago. According to him, he had not yet seen his daughter or ex-wife, as he had gone to the store for groceries upon his return and had not managed to contact them yet. He confirmed that both of their mobile phones were silent, which he found strange, but he didn't think much of it, assuming they were busy with their own affairs and would return home later. The detectives spoke with Bruce. They learned that he and Barbara had a rather complicated relationship. Despite being divorced, they had been living together again at their daughter's request. The atmosphere in the house was tense, particularly regarding Rachel's relationship with her boyfriend, which worried her parents. Bruce cited Barbara's alcohol addiction and violent behavior while intoxicated as the main reasons for their divorce. He also admitted that Barbara occasionally used illegal substances, further aggravating her behavior. Soon, Bruce became a prime suspect, as he had a possible motive and could have provoked the circumstances leading to the attack. Given that they were discussing a premeditated murder, it was highly probable that the killer should be sought within the victim's immediate environment. Authorities quickly noticed that Bruce did not seem very upset by the news of Barbara's death. He either skillfully concealed his feelings or, most likely, felt more empathy than negativity. Bruce cooperated with the investigation and allowed the apartment to be inspected. During the search of Barbara's bedroom, investigators found a small imprint on the wall that resembled a smeared trace of a bloody hand. In the kitchen, a bucket contained a sponge with suspicious dark spots and a latex glove. It was evident that the hallway had been cleaned. On the table, there was a knife set missing several items that were identical to those found with the victim. With all these facts in mind, suspicions against Bruce grew. The police arrested him and took him to the station for questioning. However, Bruce immediately provided an alibi that was easy to verify. He was indeed hundreds of kilometers away from the city at that time, which could be confirmed through motel records. At the same time, Bruce's colleagues stated that he was working with another client during the massacre. Bruce has been removed from the suspect list. Despite his quarrelsome nature, Bruce had no idea that Barbara might have mortal enemies capable of murder, especially since they had been living together. Rachel was now missing. The police wanted to talk to their daughter. During the inspection of the family's home, no signs of a break-in were found. However, serious concerns arose that Rachel, who had disappeared from all radar, was in danger. Attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. She ignored calls from relatives and law enforcement. Also, no ransom demands received. According to the neighbors, the last activity in the apartment was noticed several days prior. They also learned about Rachel's relationship with her older boyfriend, Ian Allen. Additionally, Bruce mentioned the problems that arose between Barbara and the young couple, including an incident when she took Rachel from Ian's house and forbade Rachel from seeing him. It's possible that Ian and Rachel want revenge on Barbara for interfering in their love affair. The police went to Ian's house to talk to him and find out Rachel's whereabouts. Their suspicions were quickly confirmed. Ian was also missing. His parents said that they had last seen him a few days ago, and since then, they were unable to reach him. They were very worried and were about to go to the police station to file a report about their son's disappearance. The police granted them permission to look around his room. Law enforcement took Ian's laptop for forensic examination. Shortly before his disappearance, he was planning a route to Tampa, Florida. His car was missing from the family home, leading the authorities to declare it wanted and distribute descriptions of both Ian and Rachel. It seemed they was involved in the crime and was now on the run. Authorities began to track the activity of their bank cards, and less than a day later, they recorded a payment at a gas station in Louisiana. On September 15, 2006, one of the officers noticed Ian's car on the road. He was stopped and surrendered without resistance. Interestingly, as soon as the car was stopped, Rachel ran out, approached the officers, claiming she had been kidnapped and held against her will. Although her story appeared unconvincing, Ian was arrested and taken to the police station while Rachel was sent to the hospital. Doctors confirmed that she showed no signs of torture or even forced detention. It seems she was in the car voluntarily, without any coercion. Moreover, during subsequent interviews with law enforcement officers, discrepancies and contradictions were noted in her story. After a medical examination, Rachel was also arrested and taken to the station. She stated that on the night of September 13, 2006, she woke up to her mother's screams. Rachel jumped out of bed and ran to Barbara's bedroom, where she saw her boyfriend stabbing Barbara to death. As soon as he saw Rachel, he punched her in the face, causing her to fall and lose consciousness. She only regained her senses later in a hotel room where he had kidnapped her. He held Rachel there for several days before they began moving towards the state line to escape. Rachel insisted that she had been kidnapped, but the police quickly gathered evidence suggesting that she was lying. At the very least, there were no signs of a punch on her face as she had claimed. Additionally, her DNA samples were found on the latex gloves, the sponges, and even on the tape that was used to cover the box containing the body in Barbara's bedroom. This indicated that she at least assisted in the attempt to remove the evidence. The criminals had cleaned the knives, and there were no fingerprints on the handles, making it possible to reconstruct the course of events only from the statements of the killers. When reviewing the correspondence between Rachel and Ian, investigators discovered that Rachel had been spinning tales about her boyfriend for quite some time, including that her mother was going to kill her and that she faced daily threats. She simply feared for her life. Of particular importance were the girl's messages on the night of the murder, where she wrote to her boyfriend about another conflict with her mother, stating it was time for them to put an end to it. What exactly she meant remained a mystery. Rachel insisted that they had discussed escaping to another state, yet the context seemed more grim. Police reviewed CCTV footage from the gas station Rachel and Ian visited before their arrest. The recordings showed Rachel calmly walking next to her boyfriend, smiling. She was clearly not in captivity. Detectives decided to speak with Ian once more, and until that moment, he had denied any accusations. Finally, Ian confessed that a brutal crime had occurred. According to him, Barbara had threatened that she would press charges against him for the corruption of a minor, fearing that he would lose his job. He believed that Rachel's freedom was at stake, and an unstable, alcoholic woman could ruin his life, which he could not permit. Thus, the young lovers decided that the only way to solve the problem was to kill her. They planned the entire thing together, with Rachel watching for the perfect moment when her mother would be most vulnerable. Thanks to Rachel, he learned that Bruce was going on a business trip at night. He entered the house after Rachel left the door unlocked while her mother was asleep in the kitchen. He took several knives and then attacked Barbara. His first blow landed on her eye. He thought it would instantly kill her, but he was wrong. He could not pull the knife out of her eye socket. Instead of dying, she screamed loudly and began to resist. Out of fear, he kept striking her with another knife because he wanted her to be quiet as quickly as possible. He took the blame for the crime, claiming that Rachel was just watching, then helped to clean the room and dispose of the body. Ian's story sounded convincing but had one flaw: he reported only 2 knives, while police found 3. Investigators believe that Barbara's daughter also took an active part in the murder and used a 3rd knife. They then wrapped the body, along with the murder weapon, in a sheet, placed it in a large TV box, and removed it from the house, eventually throwing it in the water. Bruce's neighbor, Malini, confirmed that on that fateful night, he heard loud noises coming from the apartment. He saw 2 young people, a guy and a girl, carrying out a large box at night, which seemed strange, especially since he had heard women's screams just half an hour earlier. It became apparent that they were disposing of a body to attract less attention. After getting rid of Barbara's body, the young people returned. Rachel was cleaning up the blood in her mother's bedroom while her boyfriend was taking a mattress and several other items far from the crime scene to burn. During this time, Rachel was even writing a love message to Ian, clearly not upset by her mother's death. Investigators believe that Rachel actively participated in the crime because she behaved too calmly and did not even attempt to call for help. Instead, she encouraged her boyfriend to finish what he had started. This behavior contradicted her boyfriend's claim that Rachel was petrified with horror during the massacre. In June 2008, Rachel's trial began. By this time, her story had changed several times. Now, the criminal admitted that she had lied about the kidnapping and that she had gone with Ian voluntarily. At the trial, she adhered to a version more reminiscent of Ian's words, saying that she was scared and became an accomplice not of her own free will, but simply out of fear. However, this narrative seemed more like a return to the general legend from which she had initially deviated. Rachel continued to insist that she did not participate in the massacre, simply cleaned up the traces of the crime and helped get rid of the body by packing it in a box. The lawyer failed to convince the court of her innocence, and the jury found her guilty of murdering Barbara. Rachel was sentenced to 25 years in prison. 2 months after these events, the trial of Ian Allen began. When he learned how Rachel had shifted all the blame onto him and also fabricated a story about the kidnapping, he stopped covering for her in anger. He stated that she had been the mastermind of the crime from the very beginning. However, now it was too much. The prosecutor's office convincingly proved that he cold-bloodedly stabbed a defenseless woman in a fit of hatred. Ian was also found guilty and sentenced to a similar punishment of 25 years in prison, despite the guy's words. Even now, many support Rachel and consider her innocent. In particular, her brother and grandparents believe that she is a victim. On October 14, 2022, Rachel was released early from prison for good behavior. She went to live with her father in Newport Beach, California, where he still resides, while Ian Allen is still serving his sentence in a state prison. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Rena Verk. Rena Verk had been born on March 10, 1983, in Saanich, British Columbia, Canada. Her family was of Indian origin, with her mother, Suman, having come from an Indian-Canadian family, and her father, Manjit, being an immigrant from India. Rena's parents had formerly been Hindus and had converted to Jehovah's religion. Rina struggled to fit in with her peers in the Saanich community, where Sikhism was popular among Indo-Canadians. Unfortunately, she was severely bullied at school due to her appearance and ethnic background, which set her apart from her predominantly white classmates. She was bullied due to her unusual appearance, being overweight and having brown skin. At home, Rina faced strict rules tied to her parents' religious beliefs, which were in stark contrast to her friends, who were starting to become independent. Her parents began to worry when they discovered her persistent bullying and feared it could negatively affect her mental health, potentially leading to depression. In May 1994, Rina's family moved to a new location, resulting in her transferring schools from Burnside Primary School. Her parents hoped this action would put an end to the bullying she initially experienced, and it seemed to be effective. Rina's mood improved, and she formed new friendships that brought her happiness. However, things took a turn for the worse when her new friends began to distance themselves from her, and the bullying began again. Rina graduated from elementary school in 1996 and began attending Coquitz Middle School. There, she met a new group of friends whom she considered cool kids. The group was famous for breaking the rules, drinking, and smoking, which represented the freedom that Rina desired, freedom from the strictness of her parents and their rules. Although she felt accepted by her new friends, her parents disapproved of her new relationships, leading Rina to become more rebellious. In 1996, when Rina was 13 years old, a friend suggested she leave home. The friend told her she could be adopted by telling the police that her parents had physically abused her. Rina took this advice and accused her parents of assault, but no charges were brought due to lack of evidence. Rina was taken away from her family and lived with her grandparents, who believed her story. However, things got worse when Rina falsely accused her father of sexually assaulting her, causing him extreme pain and suffering. In 1997, her father was arrested and sent to prison while awaiting trial for sexually assaulting Rina. Luckily, the charges against her father were dropped when Rina admitted that she had made up the entire story. Rina felt uncomfortable living with her grandparents, so she was placed in a foster home. There, she made friends and began imitating the behavior of those around her, including talking about gangs and even falsely claiming to be a member of one. However, Rina soon realized that living in a foster home was not as fun as she thought because she still had to follow rules and curfews. Finally, she apologized to her parents and returned home. However, her time with her parents had ended very quickly. Rina had left her parents' house again and stayed in a youth shelter. Over the next few months, she had bounced between her parents' home, foster care, and the youth shelter. This volatile situation reflected the challenges she had faced as a teenager trying to cope with her relationships with her parents, social workers, and government officials. Rina had yearned for acceptance and friendship, but her strict upbringing and overprotective parents had made her feel like an outcast among her peers. She had desperately wanted to fit in and had tried her best to gain their approval. Middle school had been the most confusing and emotionally challenging time of her life. Rina had sought recognition from those who had previously rejected her. Until she had received an invitation to a party on November 14, 1997, she had been delighted at the opportunity to interact with the popular kids. Rina's life had taken a turn during an overnight gathering with celebrities, which had initially taken place behind a school in Saanich. However, due to police intervention, the group had moved to Craigflower Bridge. The gathering had not gone as Rina had planned. At 10:40 p.m., just 20 minutes before curfew, Rina had called her parents to say she was coming home. Unfortunately, this would be the last time Rina's parents would hear from her. At Craigflower Bridge, a group of teenagers had drunk alcohol and smoked marijuana. Later, another group of girls from the Shoreline 6 gang had targeted Rina without warning. They had assaulted her, burned her forehead with a lit cigarette, and tried to burn her hair. The attack had continued until a girl had intervened and ordered the others to stop. Rena had tried to escape and go home after the initial attack, but two teenagers, Kelly and Warren, had chased her. They had dragged Rena to the other side of the Craigflower Bridge, where the attack on her had continued. Kelly and Warren had punched and kicked her, then held her head underwater until she died. After Rena's death, the attackers had taken off her sweater and shoes and rolled her body into the water. Meanwhile, Rena's parents had become increasingly worried when she did not return home before curfew. They had initially thought she might be at her grandparents' house or a group home, but she had not been at either location. A friend had revealed that Rena was still at the party when the friend had left around 11 p.m. The next day, Rena's family had reported her missing, but the police had responded slowly due to her past history of running away. Rumors had spread among students at the local middle school about a brutal beating and a body found in the nearby gorge waterway. The group of teens involved, known as the Shoreline Six, had remained silent about the incident. However, a witness had eventually come forward to police, saying she had seen Kelly and Warren following Rena after the beating. It had taken a week for police to begin investigating Rena's disappearance after her family had reported her missing. Although many witnesses and teachers had heard rumors about the incident, no one had reported it to the police. It wasn't until a student had come forward as a witness that the police got involved. On November 21, 1997, Warren and Kelly had been arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault. The members of the Shoreline Six had initially remained anonymous due to protection under Canada's Young Offenders Act, and they had faced serious assault charges. A police helicopter had been dispatched to the Craigflower Bridge area on November 22, but no evidence had been discovered until a thorough search had been conducted on the ground. This search had eventually discovered a body hidden in the weeds, later confirmed to be the missing person, Rena Verk. The forensic pathologist had concluded that Rena's death was due to drowning. However, an autopsy had shown that she had also suffered severe head injuries, which could have led to death. Rena had been only 14 years old when she had passed away. The 6 girls involved in the attack on Rena had initially been charged at the youth court in February 1998. To protect their identities, their names were not being made public. 3 of the girls had pleaded guilty to assault causing bodily harm, while the remaining 3 had been found guilty of the same offense after a trial. They had received sentences ranging from 60 days of conditional release to 1 year in prison. Rena's murder had led to the prosecution of 2 individuals, Kelly and Warren, who had been charged with her murder. Due to the severity of the crime, they had been tried in adult court despite being underage. Warren Glowatsky had had a difficult childhood. His mother had been absent for much of his life due to her struggles with alcoholism. At the time of Rena's murder, he had been living with a friend after his father had moved to California without him. Warren's trial had begun in April 1999, and he had been convicted of second-degree murder in June of the same year. As a result, he had received a life sentence. Warren had been eligible for parole after serving 7 years in prison because he had been a juvenile when the crime had occurred. During his time in prison, Warren had done things that could have had a positive impact on his decision to be paroled. This process had included measures such as meeting with Rena's family. In July 2006, Warren had been paroled from prison unescorted, and he had been finally fully released in June 2010. Rena's family had not opposed Warren's request for parole because they had believed he had shown genuine remorse for his actions. In contrast, Kelly Ard had come from a more stable family, one that had always supported her throughout the trial. She had been 15 years old when Rena had been murdered. Although her lawyer had requested that her case be heard in youth court, the Supreme Court of Canada had denied the request due to the violent nature of the crime and Kelly's apparent lack of remorse. Kelly had initially been convicted of second-degree murder in March 2000, but her conviction had been overturned in January 2003 due to an unfair trial. Pending appeal, Kelly had been released on bail after serving 18 months of her life sentence. However, during this time, she had been charged with assault causing bodily harm for attacking a 58-year-old woman in a Vancouver park. As a result, her bail had been revoked and she had been sent back to prison. In March 2004, Kelly had faced a new trial. Witnesses had testified that she had bragged about being responsible for Rena's death. Warren had claimed that he had seen Kelly drown Rena, but Kelly's lawyer had questioned Warren's credibility, pointing out inconsistencies in his initial statements to police and during the trial. Kelly Art had testified during the trial that she had assaulted Rena to protect her friends because she had believed Rena would harm them. However, she had denied responsibility for Rena's death and instead had pointed to Warren and two other girls as the culprits. Despite the evidence, Kelly had shown no remorse and had offered no clear motive for the planned attack. When asked about her future, Kelly had appeared resigned, admitting that her life had been ruined and that she would likely be convicted. The jury had deliberated for 5 days before deadlocking, leading to a mistrial in July 2004. In February 2005, Kelly's second trial had taken place, with Warren again testifying as a key witness. He had repeated his earlier testimony, saying that he and Kelly had assaulted Rena, leaving her dead in the water. As a result, Kelly had been convicted of second-degree murder on April 12, 2005, and had received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for 7 years. However, the British Columbia Court of Appeal had later overturned Kelly's conviction in September 2008. The court had ordered a retrial, citing the incorrect jury conviction in the previous trial. The decision had led to a fourth trial, allowing Kelly's case to be reconsidered in court. The Supreme Court of Canada had upheld Kelly's conviction for second-degree murder in June 2009, ending lengthy court proceedings. Years later, in 2017, Kelly was granted day parole, and in 2019, she received additional privileges, including overnight leave and extended day parole. The Parole Board of Canada's decision to continue her parole in July 2020 had attracted significant media attention. Kelly, who had initially received a life sentence, rebuilt her life on parole. She changed her name to Carrie Sim, got married, and had 2 children. She complied with the conditions of her parole, which included abstaining from the use of stimulants and avoiding contact with Rena's family. Despite the passage of time, the motives behind the teen's decision to attack and ultimately kill Rena remained unclear. One reason might have been revenge, as Rena had previously lived with the 2 girls involved in the assault. They had accused her of stealing phone books and spreading false rumors. Another girl claimed to have had a grudge against Rena for allegedly stealing her boyfriend in 2000. Rena's parents had sued the teens involved in her death, as had the British Columbia government and other parties. Rena's father explained that he wanted people to take responsibility for their actions, saying that society often failed to do so. Years later, in 2012, Rena's mother spoke out about her daughter's tragic death and the devastating effects of bullying on young people. She shared that dealing with the legal consequences of Rena's murder had left her deeply saddened. As the court cases progressed, she was finally fully feeling her loss. She was struggling more with her emotions and missed Rena even more. Rena's mother also expressed concern that bullying was becoming more severe and frequent rather than decreasing. She was shocked by the new ways young people were using technology, such as cyberbullying and texting, to harm their peers. These methods had not been available when Rena was killed, and her mother was devastated as the problem escalated. The murder of Rena Vert had led to a national debate about racism and bullying, especially among young girls. In the wake of Rena's death, Rena's parents took action to create positive change. They started anti-bullying campaigns and inclusion programs and worked with the government to implement anti-bullying measures in British Columbia schools. Rena's parents also shared their story with students, teachers, and law enforcement professionals to raise awareness about bullying. Their efforts paid off when the government introduced an anti-bullying program in schools across the province. In 2009, Rena's parents were recognized for their advocacy with the Anthony J. Hume Award of Excellence for their dedication to crime prevention and community safety. Rena Verk's life had been marked by hardships and challenges. Although she made some mistakes, it was understandable given the pressure to fit in. Despite Rena's mistakes and the false accusations against her family, her parents continued to love and support Rena unconditionally. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Graciela Garcia. Graciela Garcia was born on October 6, 1971, in Mexico. Her family was working class and they hoped to provide a better future for their children. As a result, her parents decided to move to the United States and eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. Graciela was too young to remember the hardships of the move. She attended Umatilla High School, a low-cost school where 66% of the student body was Hispanic. Graciela made friends easily and stood out with her outgoing. She later studied business at Blue Mountain College. However, since she was young, she has had a passion for hairdressing and has had the goal of owning her own hair salon. With passion and hard work, Graciela believed that her plans could come true with the right approach. By February 2006, she had become the owner of Carr's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she quickly became famous in society. Moreover, her professional image also contributed to the prestige of the salon. She is passionate about her work and has a deep understanding of new beauty trends. Thanks to that, she always has a loyal customer base. Some of her customers have become close friends and are often invited to her home. She is respected and loved by everyone in town. Her private life is also filled with joy and happiness. She was pursued by many men when she was young, but she only loved one. That man became her first love. They have two beautiful daughters, Annabelle and Gabriella, often called Gabby. However, that love did not last long. The man left the family. It seems that his feelings for her faded over time. Despite becoming a single mother, she did not feel hopeless. Instead, she focused on self-improvement and pursued a degree in cosmetology. After her divorce, Graciela met Romero Sanchez, a regular customer at the beauty salon where she worked. At first, their relationship was just a friendship. However, Romero later asked Graciela out. And she accepted. Gradually, their relationship became closer and deeper. However, when Graciela introduced Romero to her family, they felt uncomfortable because of his cold and distant attitude. Annabelle and Gabby, Graciela's two daughters, tried many times to connect with Romero, but he did not respond. Graciela's children were confused by such behavior, but they attributed it to personality differences. Graciela's partner seemed to be a strange and unapproachable person, which puzzled the people around her. They could not believe that a woman as full of life and fun as her could be so passionately in love with such a dry person. However, they still respected her decision. When Graciela announced her upcoming marriage, everyone showed their support and shared her joy. Especially Annabelle and Gabby, they wanted to see her happy and loved. On the wedding day, guests also noticed Romero's arrogance and conceit. Some thought he seemed too jealous when trying to steal all the bride's attention. When Graciela's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Romero treated them with contempt, making them feel uncomfortable. Afterwards, Graciela's relatives could not hide their true feelings about this man. Annabelle even openly stated that she did not consider him a stepfather and just wanted to maintain a normal relationship like other families. After the wedding, the Graciela family had two more sons, Arthur and Jacob. They moved in together at Graciela's house. Graciela's youngest son, Jacob, noticed that Romero began to act as if he were the sole owner of the house. Initially, Graciela tried to set personal boundaries, but because she did not like confrontation, she quickly gave in to Romero. He was hot-tempered and never gave in or apologized first. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciela continued to give in to Romero. However, over time, Graciela began to realize that she had rushed into this marriage. In conversations with her relatives, Graciela confessed that she felt constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and did not let her go anywhere alone. Despite this, Graciela never said she wanted to leave this abusive relationship. It seems she still loves him. Graciela's family gradually realized that she had become attached to the wrong man. Romero not only controlled Graciela but also lived off of his wife, much to her family's dismay. Romero was a skilled manipulator, constantly stalking Graciela, controlling her correspondence, and even threatening to break up the friendship between Graciela and her friends. He did not want to let her go anywhere, or sometimes he would show up unexpectedly, as if testing her loyalty. His jealousy became excessive and uncontrollable. She felt ashamed and self-conscious because of his behavior, and as a result, she limited her social life. She only communicated with her family and no longer connected with friends or colleagues as before. This seriously affected her work, as her profession required her to communicate regularly with clients and attend various events. Her friends and colleagues noticed a change in Graciela. She was no longer the cheerful and bright woman she used to be. She looked sad and tired, and she was clearly unhappy. Her children also noticed that she had changed in both her mood and appearance. They saw that she had lost her independence and confidence. After discussing it with each other, Graciela's family agreed that they did not like Romero. However, since he was Graciela's choice, there was not much they could do to change the situation. They could only respect her decision. Other relatives also expressed doubts about Romero, but no one knew how to help her in this situation. Graciela and Romero needed help with their relationship, and Gabby had mentioned this to her mother. However, Graciela believed that she would manage her personal life on her own. In 2018, Graciela decided to move her salon to her home for convenience. However, her family was skeptical as they had not heard about the plan for 12 years. Some customers commented that Romero's constant presence at the salon made them feel uncomfortable. Some people thought that Graciela moved the salon home to solve the problem, but others doubted that the idea came from Romero. However, Graciela was happy about the change and believed that working from home would bring her closer to Jacob and Romero. At the end of the year, she and her husband renovated a room into a beauty salon, completing it in May 2019. The salon closed shortly after, but Graciela's reputation remained intact, and rumors of her reopening attracted many customers, including new ones. Graciela was delighted with her career success, but became increasingly secretive about her personal life. However, after 17 years of marriage, Graciela and Romero decided to separate. Romero always kept in touch with their children and saw them regularly. Graciela and her ex-husband shared custody of their youngest son, while the other children were grown and living on their own, but they still kept in regular contact with their family and participated in family activities. Graciela went through the divorce with a calm and optimistic attitude. After the divorce, Graciela focused on developing her beauty salon and spent her free time taking care of her family and close friends. On the morning of November 9, 2019, Romero visited Graciela's eldest daughter, Annabelle, and reported Graciela missing. According to Romero, Graciela and he had been together the night before. However, when he woke up the next morning, he was surprised to find that she was no longer there. Romero tried to contact Graciela but received no response. Annabelle was shocked by the news and Romero's reaction. He cried and appeared distressed. This made Annabelle feel strange because Romero usually did not show emotions in front of them. Romero also said that Graciela had been acting strangely recently. even hinting that she might have found another man in her life. Annabelle felt that Romero's words were insincere and his tears seemed fake, which made her start to doubt his behavior and worry about her mother. Romero usually avoided communicating with his wife's children. But after a while, he changed and decided to connect with them. After Romero left, Annabelle decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Graciella's family gathers to find out what's happening to her. Graciella's car was parked in the driveway. If she decided to leave Romero, she would definitely use her own car. Another thing that surprised them was the neatness of Graciella's house. Everything was perfectly arranged and in order, far beyond normal. However, this was completely contrary to Graciella's personality and lifestyle, because if she went somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. Normally, Graciella would spend a lot of time in front of the mirror choosing her outfit for the day. However, the fact that she went out without any jewelry worried the whole family and they wondered why. As she walked around the house, Gabby noticed something strange. The large blanket had been put in the washing machine, something her mother never did. The blanket was too heavy and someone else had washed it, apparently Romero, which made Gabby suspicious. Romero did not explain this, saying that he did not pay attention to such details. But then people realized that several important items were missing from the house, including Graciella's passport, driver's license, and cell phone. This raised further suspicions about Romero's actions. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement at the police station and discovered something surprising. Although Romero had known about his wife's disappearance since the 9th or possibly earlier, he had not notified the police. Therefore, Annabelle was the first to file a missing persons report to her mother. Another incident raised concerns about Graciella's safety. She asked Gabby to pick her up, but even though Gabby said it would take some time because of the distance, Graciella continued to ask. Gabby was surprised by this unexpected request for help. Graciella explained that everything was fine and that her request was just a result of an argument with Romero. When they met, Graciella appeared relaxed, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry. She believed that arguments between lovers were just a form of renewal in their relationship. However, after they broke up, Gabby remained uneasy and became increasingly worried about her mother. The investigation began after Annabelle contacted the police. This caused the relationship between Graciella's family and Romero to deteriorate. Romero seemed angry that Graciella's family had notified law enforcement about her disappearance. Romero gave an official statement about his wife's disappearance. He said that Graciella either wanted to be alone or that she had moved in with another man and would be back soon. That was his answer every time someone asked. However, the police did not ignore this report. Officers launched an investigation into the missing Graciella's disappearance, considering the possibility that she may have been a victim of a crime. They started by searching her house, where her relatives reported that only a few personal items were missing, without finding any other suspicious signs. The investigation expanded to include interviews with her children, Romero, and other close family members, including her ex-husband. However, no useful information was gathered from these interviews. While everyone expressed doubts about Romero's behavior, he cooperated fully with the detectives, allowing them to search his home, answering questions, providing his DNA, and taking a polygraph test. Despite this cooperation, there was insufficient evidence to prove his involvement in the case. Further investigation revealed that Graciella's phone last sent a signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9th at 12:30 p.m. After that, her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media accounts showed no activity, suggesting that she had not accessed since her disappearance. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all the places she regularly visited were checked, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. The investigators found her disappearance to be highly suspicious. as it seemed she had vanished without leaving any clues. For months into the investigation, the Hermiston Police Department announced that they had found no reliable information about Graciella's last whereabouts. Although Romero had not reported her missing, he was not accused of any wrongdoing. Graciella's family became increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress despite their constant contact with authorities throughout the incident. However, as time passed, these updates became less frequent and eventually stopped, forcing Graciella's children to take initiative and contact the police station themselves to inquire about the status of the case. In an effort to reinvigorate the search, Graciella's family turned to the media in March 2020, seeking public assistance and attention. They hoped that by sharing their story, they might gather new information. Graciella's daughter Gabby was mainly in charge of communicating with the press. She expressed her family's increasing frustration with the lack of progress in the case and criticized the police for not keeping them informed for such a long time. She urged investigators to focus more on finding her mother, Graciella, and to take a closer look at the suspicious circumstances surrounding disappearance. Graciella's family suspected something was wrong, as the condition of her belongings was strange and unusual in her home. However, it was unclear who would want to harm her, as Graciella did not appear to have any enemies. The family also believed that Graciella would not have left on her own, as she would have contacted them to reassure. Posters and flyers describing Graciella were scattered throughout the city in search of clues to the case. Graciella, who is 49 years old, Latina, 1.6 meters tall, 62 kilograms, and with dyed blonde hair. Local residents were also asked to be vigilant and report any information that might help the investigation. Her children were so concerned that they asked for a new detective team to take over the case, as they suspected bias in collaboration with a suspect, Romero, who was acquainted with the original investigators. The Graciella family expressed concerns about several inconsistencies in the investigation, including the fact that Romero's phone was turned off on the day of Graciella's disappearance. Additionally, Romero's calm behavior raised suspicions, as it didn't with the typical reaction expected from someone whose loved one has suddenly gone missing. As a result, the Graciella family demanded that the suspect be arrested immediately. Police Chief Jason Edmiston responded to allegations surrounding Graciella's disappearance, confirming that her case is being treated as suspicious and possibly involving foul play. However, he emphasized that this is just one theory and that the investigation remains impartial, driven by evidence. Edmiston also dismissed claims of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as baseless. Edmiston noted that the spread of misinformation has hindered the investigation. Certain information must be kept confidential, and authorities have sought assistance from the FBI. The police chief expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions. Separately, Gabby organized a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move seen as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation. This perceived criticism suggested that the police were not doing enough to find Graciella. 1 year after Graciella disappeared, her family organized a memorial gathering. Here, friends and people who knew her shared stories about her lively and cheerful personality. They prayed for her safe return, lit candles, and later placed signs outside the police station, urging authorities to continue the search for Graciella Garcia. In September 2023, a major development in the case occurred when Romero Sanchez was severely injured in an attack and that required surgery. There was speculation that the shooter was Mason Garcia, Graciella's brother. The attack suggests that Graciella's family had become frustrated with the lack of progress in the investigation and took matters into their own hands, potentially leading to further tragedy. The disappearance of Graciella Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in a state of agonizing. This has significantly affected the health and mental well-being of her family. Living without knowing what happened to a loved one can be more challenging than coping with a confirmed loss. It remains unknown whether Graciela is alive or not. Her children continue to hope that the truth will soon be revealed and justice will be served to the criminals. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kimberly Antonakis. Kimberly Antonakis was born in 1974 in New York, USA. She was the only child in her family. Although she grew up in love and wealth, her father, Thomas, founded his own computer company. When Kimberly was young, her parents divorced. Kimberly left to live with her mother, and she still kept in touch with her father. Her father Thomas spent weekends taking Kimberly out and spending all his free time with her. When Kimberly's mother found a new man and decided to move to Florida, she was faced with a difficult choice: to stay with her mother or her father. Since she did not want to leave her familiar environment, Kimberly decided to live with her father Thomas. Kim began living with Thomas. Kimberly grew up to be a well-behaved and sociable child. Over the years, Kimberly became a beautiful and humorous girl. In 1994, Kimberly began attending the College of Staten Island. At that time, she informed her father that she felt she was old enough to live on her own. Kimberly's father, Thomas, was worried about this decision but still praised her and decided not to object. Instead, Thomas promised to ensure that Kimberly had a safe place of her own. Her father Thomas bought an apartment for Kimberly in a wealthy area of the city. He also installed an alarm system for the apartment to ensure Kimberly's safety. To avoid having to park far from home, Thomas bought a parking space in the garage across the street. He also bought Kimberly a cell phone and a pager so they could stay in touch regularly. Kimberly works as an accountant at a company. She lives a normal life like other students, often participating in entertainment activities and parties. Although her father Thomas repeatedly asked her to return to live with him, Kimberly insisted on being independent. In early 1995, Kimberly's best friend Liz Pace's house was being renovated. Liz, along with her boyfriend Joshua Torres and their young son, came to Kimberly's house to ask for temporary accommodation. Out of kindness, Kimberly agreed to let Liz Pace's family stay. One day, Kimberly and Liz decided to go to a party. They got their makeup done, their hair done, and their outfits picked out. Afterwards, they had a great time and danced at the party. When the party was over, Kimberly drove Liz home in her 1994 white Honda Accord. However, Kimberly did not go up to the apartment with Liz because she had unfinished business. The two girls hugged and said goodbye. Liz returned to the apartment first. The next morning, when Kimberly did not show up for work, her co-workers contacted her father, Thomas, to inform him that Kimberly had not shown up for work. Kimberly's absence was unusual because she was always on time. Thomas was also unable to reach his daughter on her cell phone, which made him feel worried and had a bad feeling. Thomas decided to contact Kimberly's friends. However, no one had any information about where she had gone after leaving the party early in the morning of March 1st. When Thomas did not hear from her friends, Thomas decided to go to the police to report the incident. The police thought that Kimberly might have stayed at a friend's house overnight and would return soon, so they advised him to wait at least 24 hours. However, Thomas was not satisfied. He decided to conduct an investigation himself to find Kimberly. After learning of Kimberly's disappearance, Kimberly's mother met with a psychic after being introduced by a friend. Upon seeing Kimberly's photo, the psychic said that she was alive, but very weak and dehydrated. She also said that Kimberly had been kidnapped by acquaintances and that Kimberly had tried to escape several times. She added that the danger came from several people and that one of them had a name that started with the letter J, and that this person was apparently the leader of the gang. Thomas, Kimberly's father, went to the places his daughter frequented and talked to many people, but did not get any important information. Thomas went to Kimberly's apartment and garage to check. When entering Kimberly's apartment, Thomas noticed a bright object lying on the floor near the wall. It turned out to be a small gold earring. Thomas remembered that he had given Kimberly this pair of earrings. Thomas put the earring in his pocket. After checking, Kimberly was not in the apartment either. Thomas only met Kimberly's best friend Liz and her boyfriend Joshua Torres and their 2-year-old child. Thomas knew about Kimberly letting Liz's family stay temporarily. But Thomas did not support this decision. When Thomas talked about Kimberly's situation, Liz's family was surprised and worried about Kimberly's disappearance. Joshua reported that he was looking for Kimberly and volunteered to help. Thomas then went to the police station a second time and insisted that they conduct a search. The police agreed to help him and began an investigation. The police began to investigate the date of Kimberly's disappearance on February 28th. It was found that Kimberly went to college in the morning, then went to work. After work, Kimberly went home and had dinner. She then attended a party with Liz and returned home around 4 a.m. Kimberly then went to the parking lot, but the reason she was there at such an early hour is still unclear. Kimberly's bank account was also investigated. The police discovered that Kimberly had last used her bank card the evening before she went missing. The police assumed that Kimberly had been kidnapped. Due to the lack of concrete evidence, the police looked into the information that Kimberly's mother had received from the psychic. Witness interviews were then conducted. The first people interviewed were Liz and Joshua. The police discovered that a total of 65 calls had been made from Kimberly's phone on the morning of March 1st. This surprised the police because of the large number of calls. However, Joshua explained that he had called all of his friends and acquaintances to find out where Kimberly had gone and why she had not stayed home overnight. Joshua said that he considered Kimberly to be like a sister to him. Thanks to Liz's testimony, the police were able to identify the clothes that Kimberly was wearing. A portrait of her has been drawn and will be released to help in the search. In addition, the police have also noticed some distinctive tattoos on Kimberly's body. One of them is a scorpion, which corresponds to her zodiac sign. The other tattoo is located on her waist and represents the infinity sign in the form of 2 naked people parallel to each other. A search for the missing car has been launched. The police have checked all scrap yards and other places where the car could be dismantled for parts or sold. However, this search has not yielded any positive results. The police have advised Thomas to pay attention to letters and phone calls he receives, as it is possible that his daughter's kidnappers will contact Thomas and offer a ransom. At around 2 a.m. on March 4th, the emergency services received a report of a fire. A large abandoned house was on fire at 86 Woodhaven Avenue in Queens. Fire crews were called in to put out the fire. When the fire was finally extinguished, firefighters found a charred body in the basement of the building. Forensic experts revealed that the deceased was a young woman between the ages of 20 and 25. Some of her long black hair was still on her head. There were also traces of tape. The woman's legs were tied tightly, and her hands were tied behind her back. However, the worst part was that she was still alive when the fire broke out, as evidenced by her lungs filled with smoke. In fact, the young woman had been brutally burned alive. Police suspect that the body may be that of Kimberly, who had gone missing. However, dental records need to be examined to confirm the identity. At the same time, experts have also analyzed the ashes to determine the victim's identity. When the autopsy was done, experts found no other traces besides the body. However, they found tattoos that matched the description of the missing woman. Records from the dental clinic also confirmed that this was how Kimberly Antonakis' body was found. A witness to the fire reported that he often walked his dog. However, the pet had been behaving strangely every time it passed the house. After the fire and the discovery of the body, it was discovered what had attracted the dog's attention. Kimberly tried to free herself and call for help. The dog had heard sounds coming from the basement thanks to its sensitive hearing, while humans cannot perceive it. When the police questioned the homeowner, it turned out that he had put the house up for sale and had been monitoring its condition through letters and receipts. However, this man had not checked the basement, only the house from the outside. The police decided to question Joshua again because they still had many unanswered questions about him. Notably, they also noticed an interesting coincidence that his name started with the letter J. This time, Joshua revealed to them about a friend who had not been contacted on the day Kimberly went missing. It was a young Russian man nicknamed Psycho who had a romantic relationship with Kimberly. The police decided to verify the information about this person and learned that Psycho was a Russian citizen who moved to the United States as a child, and that he later joined a gang and repeatedly broke the law. Thus, a suspicious suspect appeared and was soon arrested. During the interrogation, Psycho said that he knew about Kimberly's death. His reaction shocked the police because Psycho insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime, but also showed deep sorrow. It seems he is experiencing real emotions. After investigation, Psycho's alibi was confirmed. Once again, the investigation hit a dead end. Kimberly's family decided to seek help from a psychic once again. This time, the psychic said she saw 4 people involved in the case. She also said that the kidnappers wanted to contact the family but were unable to do so. The abduction initially showed no signs of a tragic ending. Thomas then announced a $10,000 reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the arrest of the perpetrators. Thomas could not forget the psychic's words. He began to think about what she had said about the kidnappers wanting to contact the family. He wondered what that meant and what was stopping them from doing so. When he returned home, Thomas remembered a small detail from the day Kimberly went missing. Thomas had listened to all the answering machine recordings because he hoped Kimberly would contact him. However, there was no voicemail except for 2 blank messages. When he turned them on, he heard nothing, just silence on the other end of the phone. Thomas mistook them for a technical malfunction or a communication problem. 5 days after Kimberly's body was discovered, the police found her car. It was parked in a quiet part of town, near the crime scene. The police hoped to find fingerprints in the car, but unfortunately the car had been washed. The only traces left in the car were a few strands of Kimberly's hair and an earring. During this time, Thomas was implicated in a local mafia hit. Some members of Thomas's crew even blamed him for their daughter's death, as if Thomas's dark actions had caused Kimberly's troubles. However, Thomas denied any involvement. The police investigated this information through their own channels but found no evidence to confirm it. Thomas did not appear to have had anything to do with the incident and continued his business openly. In July 1995, a young man was arrested by police at a New York City home for burglary. However, during questioning, he provided information related to Kimberly's case. The detainee claimed that he had heard from an acquaintance that his friends had kidnapped and then burned the girl alive. When the police learned that the man was Joshua Torres, who lived in Kimberly's apartment and had been involved in the search for her, they decided to take a closer look at Joshua Torres. Joshua was asked to come in for questioning and he denied any involvement in the incident. However, during a lengthy conversation, he made a confession. Joshua said that if he had really been the kidnapper, he would have fed Kimberly. This intrigued the police because there was no information given that Kimberly had died of hunger, thirst, or cold. Only the police knew this information. The police needed more evidence to clear up the case. After investigating, they discovered that Joshua Torres had a criminal record. Furthermore, he had no job and was living off Liz. Meanwhile, Liz worked to support both of them. Joshua took care of the child and had free time to secretly plan the crime. Joshua followed Kimberly and learned her habits, and kidnapped Kimberly and hid her in an abandoned house. But surprisingly, Joshua did not ask for ransom. During the investigation, the calls Joshua made that morning were analyzed. The results showed that Joshua had lied when he said he called Kimberly's friends and acquaintances. But when checked, most of the phone numbers were from random people who had nothing to do with Kimberly. When checking Joshua's pager data, the police discovered that Joshua had sent several strange messages on March 1st. These evidences gradually closed the circle around Joshua Torres. Finally, the police had a solid lead to arrest Joshua. When the police told Joshua that they no longer considered Kimberly's ex-boyfriend a suspect, Joshua changed his story. Joshua said that he suspected his friends of murdering Kimberly. Joshua confessed to assisting in the kidnapping. Joshua said he did not think Joshua's accomplices would decide to kill Kimberly. According to Joshua, they only wanted to demand ransom and release Kimberly, but the plan failed. When the kidnappers could not contact Thomas, even recorded a ransom message. However, for some reason, the recording was not saved on the answering machine. The kidnappers were angry that Thomas did not respond. The kidnappers were scared because the psychic said that the suspect's name began with the letter J. This information was released to the media and broadcast on TV. After speaking with the police, Joshua was released on bail and then disappeared. At the same time, Joshua's accuser, Jose, was shot in the back of the head while he was with his wife. Jose's wife later admitted to the police that her husband did not trust Joshua, used a tape recorder when talking to Joshua, and wanted to expose him. Police were able to establish details of the kidnapping and the crime through pager messages and statements from the suspects. The case involved 4 suspects: Joshua Torres, Julio Negrin, another man named Jose Negrin, and Nicholas Brett. It is worth noting that Julio had dated Kimberly and even intended to marry her. However, Kimberly rejected his proposal. Nicholas had just been released from prison before the kidnapping took place thanks to a bond from his mother. Nicholas had planned the incident while serving a prison sentence for serious crimes. Joshua had a criminal record dating back to his youth, including kidnapping and the legal use of weapons. A kidnapping had taken place, in which Joshua was the mastermind. Joshua directed the actions of the kidnapping group. When Kimberly returned from a party, the group of men attacked her in the parking lot. They had apparently been watching and waiting for Kimberly to be alone. To control Kimberly, they used guns to threaten Kimberly and force her to be quiet. They then tied Kimberly's hands and covered her mouth, eyes, and ears with duct tape. The group then put Kimberly in the trunk of their car and drove her to an abandoned house. There, they took Kimberly into the basement and tied her to a chair. They also took off Kimberly's shoes to prevent her from making noise by tapping her feet. The kidnappers told Kimberly that her father owed money and that they would release her when the money was paid. One of the kidnappers, Julio, was assigned to take care of her, bringing her food and water twice a day and keeping her warm. However, Julio left the house because he was afraid of the consequences. So, for 3 days, Kimberly had no food, no water, and was freezing. Immediately after kidnapping Kimberly, the kidnappers notified Joshua, who then demanded a ransom of $775,000 via an audio message. Joshua then called Thomas and left 2 empty audio messages. Therefore, Thomas ignored these calls. The kidnappers were waiting for a message from Thomas, but they did not understand why Thomas did not contact them. During this time, Kimberly was left alone and fainted several times due to dehydration, but Kimberly still managed to survive. The kidnappers did not receive the ransom and were afraid of being caught, so they decided to release Kimberly. When they went down to the basement, they found Kimberly unconscious. They thought Kimberly was dead and decided to get rid of all the evidence, including the hostage. The police knew that Joshua had directed the actions of his accomplices from inside the house, so Liz did not know that Joshua had kidnapped Kimberly. At the trial, Liz said that after being questioned, Joshua came to her and confessed everything. Joshua then beat her and threatened to kill her, before fleeing. Some time after the massacre, the police investigated Jose. He was also suspected of being involved in Kimberly's murder, but there was no direct evidence. Therefore, the police decided to take statements from the kidnappers. When questioning Joshua, he denied all involvement in the case. However, Julio decided to cooperate and gave an honest statement about the incident. Information from Julio allowed Joshua's role in the case to be determined, and Joshua was charged with Kimberly's murder. Therefore, Joshua, Julio and Nicholas were charged with related crimes such as murder, kidnapping and vandalism. At the trial, after more than 10 hours of debate, Joshua was finally sentenced to life in prison for 58 years, the same sentence that Nicholas Brett also received. Julio Negrin was convicted of complicity and sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison after the incident. Kimberly's father, Thomas, was pleased with the court's decision. Because Thomas did not want criminals to be sentenced to death. In his eyes, the death penalty was not the most severe punishment. Nicholas experienced abuse and assault in prison many times, and after only 2 years of incarceration, Nicholas died of AIDS. Meanwhile, Julio was released after 2 years after completing his sentence. However, Joshua is still serving a longer sentence and cannot be released until 2053 at the earliest, if he is still alive at that time. In 2005, Thomas died of cancer. His family believes that Kimberly's death caused Thomas a lot of stress, and that cancer was part of that. The life of Kimberly Antonakos, a beautiful girl, ended suddenly and tragically. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970 in Indiana, United States, to a middle-class family and have a brother. From a young age, John had a strong ambition to succeed. He valued being independent and continually sought ways to better himself, as well as looking for opportunities for growth and advancement. After graduating from high school, John began searching for ways to earn money. According to his brother, John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant. However, he quit his job soon after, but the exact reason for his departure is unclear. Undeterred, John quickly found a new job that offered more freedom, allowing him to explore and develop his passion for pursuing a career in sales. John started working as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. Initially, his family teased him, but he soon demonstrated his capabilities to everyone, and he also found his purpose in life. By the end of his first year, John had become one of the company's top salesmen, and he was eager to continue achieving more. John worked extremely long hours, typically between 12 to 16 hours a day. As a result, he became a top sales performer, earning recognition at company meetings. John's success also made him a source of inspiration and guidance for his fellow salespeople. During this time, he met Judy, a 20-year-old woman from a low-income family in Texas. Judy was born in October 1969. She was confident extremely and outgoing. Although John wasn't planning to hire any additional salespeople at the time, but she was able to convince John that she had what it took to achieve great success in sales. Judy's past was marked by significant life events. With her parents' consent, she had gotten married at the age of 14 and had 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, but it ultimately ended in divorce. When she met John, she was determined to start a new chapter in her life. John decided to give Judy a chance, taking her under his wing as a mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Not only did Judy prove herself as a valuable member of the sales team, but she also won John's heart. As time passed, they began to date. John's life was thriving, both personally and professionally. He has built a solid reputation for his sales and training abilities, and most importantly, he has the love and support of his wife Judy. John expanded on his experience by starting his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. He also offered training sessions for salespeople, sharing his personal secrets and enthusiasm that had made him successful in the industry. John's company quickly rose to the top in the area, and he credited his success to Judy's support. After establishing his career, John and Judy got married in 1992. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica. As John's business continued to thrive, they relocated to better homes, providing their children with access to excellent schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had a very good relationship with Judy's stepchildren, Christina and Daniel. Christina was a sweet girl, while Daniel was more energetic and mischievous. The family enjoyed a comfortable life, thanks to John's growing wealth. He openly showcased his success to motivate the young salespeople he trained, demonstrating the potential rewards of hard work and determination. However, as Judy's children entered their teenage years, problems arose. Christina associated with a group of friends who had unhealthy habits, and as a result she started drinking with them. According to some reports, Christina has also used drugs. Meanwhile, Daniel, 13, often appears angry and doesn't seem to fit in with his friends. On one occasion, Daniel took John's car and recklessly drove around the neighborhood with friends, damaging several mailbox posts. The next day, John visited each affected house, compensating the homeowners for the damage, to prevent them from filing a police report about the boys' actions. Around this time, John was also summoned to Daniel's school that the boy had misbehaved and they needed to discuss the issue. John and Judy's relationship became strained after he got into a physical altercation with Daniel. After 9 years together, Judy took her family to Texas to visit her childhood home and meet her brother. During the trip, Judy confided in her brother about her troubled marriage and John's mistreatment of her children. However, the situation was more complex. Judy's older children were misbehaving, and she took their side, which added to the tension. Things escalated when John suspected Judy of having an affair with one of his employees. John installed cameras in the office to gather evidence. When he obtained proof of Judy's infidelity, his life was turned upside down, and his demeanor changed drastically. He began to drink heavily, which led to intense arguments with Judy and rough treatment of their children. One incident involved his daughter Tiffany, who was beaten with a belt for not bringing her homework to school. When her teacher noticed the marks the next day, she reported it to social services. Before they arrived, John warned the 4 kids that if they wanted to maintain their luxurious lifestyle, they should say nothing about the beating. Consequently, Tiffany blamed her stepbrother Daniel. John's bad mood not only affected his family but also his employees and clients, who suffered from his outbursts of rage. To keep Judy away from her lover, John moved the family to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite his hopes for a fresh start, things did not improve. Judy started to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, while John let himself go, growing his beard, smoking, and wearing only jeans. He became increasingly distracted. The business struggled due to John's condition, nearly going bankrupt and forcing him to sell his boat to stay afloat. Office rumors swirled about Judy's alleged affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man, fueling more arguments. At one point, Judy told John she wanted a divorce, but it wouldn't be straightforward. John felt he had given Judy everything, rescuing her from poverty, accepting her children, and showering her with luxuries. When love turns to resentment, he began cutting off Judy's financial sources. John made it clear that if she left, she would leave with nothing, and he had a secret recording of her infidelity with the office employee. This was the situation at the start of 2003. The tension between John and Judy affected the children, whose behavior worsened. Even Tiffany was grounded during the holidays for starting a fire on school grounds with a friend. The arguments finally ended on Thursday, April 17, 2013, when John and Judy went out to dinner. They were likely looking for a way to resolve issues and reduce the tension between them. After dinner, the couple called home to check on their kids and told them they would be back soon. Then, Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. As John and Judy left the restaurant, John decided to bring the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was supposedly working late at the office. John and Judy arrived at the office, located in a deserted industrial area. Just before 10 p.m. John went inside to talk to Jeff, while Judy picked up Christina's notebook and returned to the car. A few minutes later, John came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side of the car to look for something. Suddenly, two loud bangs were heard, and John collapsed on the ground. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911. Police and medical units arrived at the scene within minutes. Unfortunately, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. When questioned by the police, Judy, who was inside the car when the incident happened, was unable to provide much information. Judy said she was sitting in the car when John came out of the office and opened the back door on the driver's side. Immediately, she heard two loud shots. Judy's reaction was to hide behind the seat. When she finally lifted her head, she caught a glimpse of a man in dark clothing running away from the car. Initially, it seemed like a robbery because John's wallet was missing. However, as investigators examined the scene more closely, they began to have doubts. John and Judy hadn't told anyone they would be there, which raised several questions. What were the chances of a random robbery in a deserted industrial are very rare. If the motive had been robbery, it's puzzling that the perpetrator would first kill John and then take his wallet. This is especially confusing since John was visibly wearing a valuable gold Rolex and other easily accessible jewelry. Typically, thieves would thoroughly search the victim's pockets in such situations. The fact that this didn't happen raises more questions than answers. Two bullet casings were found at the scene, which supports Judy's account of hearing two shots. One shot killed John instantly, but there's no official information about the second shot. With many unanswered questions, investigators started work taking a statement from Judy. Judy reported that her husband had argued with an employee from his company prior to the incident and identified the individual. However, she couldn't provide any additional information beyond her initial statement at the scene. Jeff, who was inside the office, also couldn't offer any useful insights, as when he heard the gunshots and went outside, it was all over. Meanwhile, authorities informed Christina, a Parker resident, that her stepfather had passed away. With robbery ruled out as a motive, detectives turned their attention to John's circle of relatives and colleagues. They began with an employee who had allegedly argued with John, but the employee claimed they had resolved their issues amicably and had a verified alibi. The investigation expanded, include John's business partners, employees, competitors, friends, and family. Judy's behavior during the funeral surprised and puzzled many people, as she seemed cheerful and socialized with friends, which was unexpected given the circumstances. Her ex-husband was also seen casually reading a newspaper at the funeral. For days after the murder, police brought in 15-year-old Daniel for questioning because he was accused of hiring gang members to kill his stepfather, John. When questioned, Daniel admitted to paying someone to hurt John, but claimed he only wanted him injured, not killed. The police arrested one of the young men that Daniel had hired, but they were released after their alibi checked out. Daniel was also released after 9 days due to lack of evidence and his status as a minor. Later, it was discovered that John had problems with Judy's children, which led to further investigation into Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. When questioned, Christina denied any involvement, and this lead also went nowhere. However, investigators were left wondering who was providing the money for these schemes. And they suspected Judy was the source. Further investigation showed that Judy and John's relationship had gotten much worse before he died, and Judy's affair was discovered. However, sources revealed that John had no plans to leave his wife and was trying to save their relationship. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband seemed to be financial gain, as detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. After John's death, Judy tried to claim this money, but the insurance company initially refused to pay due to the ongoing investigation. Receiving the insurance money becomes even more complicated when John's father suspects Judy of being involved in his son's death. Despite these leads, the case stalled due to lack of concrete evidence. Over time, the John family household underwent substantial transformations. Judy was rarely at home, as she was busy with her new partner, Jeff, who was John's trusted manager. In Judy's absence, Christina and Daniel took care of Tiffany and Erica. Later, Judy and Jeff moved out of state with Tiffany and Erica, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina, who was pregnant and had a boyfriend, stayed in the house. Although the investigation had stalled, authorities kept the case open, regularly reviewing the files in hopes of finding new leads. Their persistence paid off when they came to question some of Christina and Daniel's classmates. These schoolmates admitted to selling a firearm to Christina and Daniel. This information prompted detectives to investigate a piece of land owned by the family that Christina used for target practice. Upon inspection, several bullet casings were found. Laboratory analysis revealed a crucial clue: the bullet casings matched those from the crime scene where John was killed. In 2007, a colleague who was a narcotics officer provided additional information. The narcotics officer had been tracking Christina's ex-boyfriend, who was involved in a drug case and was arrested, to request a lighter sentence. Christina's former boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In this conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot that killed John. When confronted with this new information, 21 years old, Christina, who was linked to the weapon used in the crime, began to cooperate. She admitted to buying the weapon and calling John and Judy on the night of the incident. She had asked them to stop by the office, claiming she needed to pick up forgotten homework. Christina confessed to being part of a plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel designated as the shooter. When Daniel was 19, he was found and arrested in Arizona. Daniel was shown new evidence about the shooting and Christina's statement. He admitted to shooting John, but said his mother, Judy, was the one who planned the whole thing. Daniel said Judy had forged checks from her company to get the $7,500 to hire someone to kill John. However, when the people she hired took the money without doing the job, Judy told them to buy a gun for Daniel to use instead. Daniel also said it was Judy's idea to make up a reason for leaving the house that night by calling about homework. He said he shot John once in the head, and the second shot was an accident that happened while he was looking through John's pockets for his wallet, as his mother had told him to do. Daniel was also told to come back home without telling his younger sisters what had happened. His sister Christina helped by keeping the girls busy watching TV. Daniel said Judy convinced them to commit the crime by telling them they were being abused by John. And Judy promises them a better life with more money and freedom. It was also discovered that Judy had previously attempted to kill her husband. She had tried to poison his food, which resulted in John being briefly hospitalized with what was thought to be food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina pleaded not guilty to conspiracy and was released on bail. In March 2008, Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to admit his guilt and testify against his mother. The prosecution agreed not to charge him with murder, but he still faced a prison sentence of 20 to 25 years. Daniel claimed that when he was 14, about a year before the incident, his mother and sister asked him to help kill John. His mother gave him and his sister money to buy a pistol, black clothing, gloves, and a mask to wear on the day of the crime. She also instructed him on what to do, including showering after the crime to remove gunpowder residue. Judy took responsibility for disposing of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. In July 2009, 6 years after John's death, Judy turned herself in and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. She admitted to planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution asked for a sentence of 28 to 35 years in prison. Judy, almost 40, was sentenced to 33 years in late August 2009. Daniel was sentenced to 23 years in September, and Christina received a 5-year sentence in October. Press reports state that Daniel was released from custody in 2017. He then chose to keep a low profile. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but she tragically died from a drug overdose. This case was driven by greed. Although Judy was successful, her greater desires led her to terrible crimes. Judy's actions not only destroyed a successful business owner but also had a profound impact on her 4 children. 2 of them ended up in prison, and the younger ones were left without their parents once again. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Marta del Castillo. Marta del Castillo was born on June 19, 1991, in Seville, Spain, to parents Eva Casanova and Antonio del Castillo. At the age of 17, Marta was a normal high school student like everyone else, then her life changed completely. On January 24, 2009, Marta was in the middle of a conversation with her best friend, Sylvia Fernandez. She abruptly ended the conversation, explaining that she had to leave quickly because her boyfriend, Miguel Carcano, was waiting for her downstairs. Marta told Sylvia that she needed to talk to Miguel to clear up some issues in their relationship and promised to fill her in on everything when she returned. Marta ran into her father in the hallway and he advised her against getting on Miguel's motorcycle. In response, Marta just gave her father a light kiss on the cheek. She left her home at 5:30 p.m., and as the hours passed and she failed to return, her family started to worry. Marta's mother reached out to several people, and they all gave the same answer: Marta was probably with Miguel, who would likely know where she was. However, when they tried to contact Miguel, he didn't answer their calls. As a result, Marta's father decided to visit Miguel's house. Despite ringing the doorbell multiple times, no one answered the door. They eventually got in touch with Samuel Benitez, a close friend of Miguel's who claimed to have seen Marta that night. According to Samuel, Miguel dropped Marta off at his house at midnight, which was plausible considering it was only 11:45. Marta's family became more worried, and at 2 a.m. that morning, they reported her missing to the police. At that point, they had no idea that Marta's disappearance would become one of the most highly publicized cases in the country's history. 4 hours after Marta's disappearance was reported, the police identified Miguel Carcano, Marta's boyfriend, as a suspect. Despite this, a third report was filed at 1:30 p.m. But the authorities failed to take immediate action. The family grew increasingly frustrated with the delay. However, 17 hours after the initial request for help, the police initiated a search for Marta. As time went by, Marta's family took matters into their own hands and started collecting statements from Marta's relatives and friends. They also organized a press conference on January 27, 2009, and initiated a campaign to find her. A large protest took place in Seville the day after Marta's disappearance, with 2,000 people demanding her safe return under the slogan, "We are all Marta." A second demonstration on February 7th drew around 3,000 people, and the case received widespread media attention. After 21 days of searching, the police finally found Miguel Carcano on February 13th. The 20-year-old confessed to Marta's murder and revealed that he had dumped her body into the Guave River near his apartment. However, he claimed he did not act alone and implicated Samuel Benitez as an accomplice in disposing of the body. Samuel accepted responsibility for his role in the crime. Further investigation led to the identification of additional accomplices, including Francisco Javier Garcia Marin, aka El Cuco, a troubled minor, Francisco Delgado, Carcano's brother, and Maria Garcia, Francisco Delgado's girlfriend. All 5 suspects were arrested and interrogated, but their statements were inconsistent. Meanwhile, a thorough search for Marta's body in the river began. On February 16th, Miguel repeated his statement to a judge, claiming he had only admitted to the crime due to police pressure and was not involved in Marta's murder. Miguel Carcano changed his testimony on March 18th, claiming that he and El Cuco had violated Marta with a knife before strangling her. He then took Marta's body to Delgado's house and disposed of it in a garbage container. However, Marta's father accused Delgado's girlfriend, Maria Garcia, and theorized that Marta's body may have been destroyed, as Maria Garcia's father worked at a biological waste crematorium. Despite this theory gaining media attention, the police continued searching for Marta's body. On November 16, 2009, El Cuco was moved to a supervised apartment because he had exceeded the maximum time allowed for confinement. He was awaiting trial, which took place in February 2011. El Cuco was acquitted of abuse and murder charges due to insufficient evidence, but was sentenced to 2 years and 11 months in a juvenile detention center for covering up for Miguel. The trial for the 4 defendants Miguel, Samuel, Delgado, Maria Garcia involved in the case began on October 17, 2011. During the trial, Miguel Carcano admitted to hitting Marta with an ashtray during a heated argument, which led to her death. He also revealed that his previous statements about abusing Marta were false. The investigation revealed inconsistencies in the stories told by Delgado, Maria Garcia, and Samuel. They claimed to have no knowledge of Marta's whereabouts after her death. They alleged that Miguel fabricated the entire story to reduce his guilt. However, forensic analysis uncovered incriminating evidence. On November 22, 2011, the forensic police discovered traces of Marta's blood on Miguel's jacket. A mix of Miguel DNA and Maria Garcia's DNA was also found on a roll of fabric tape. Additionally, a DNA match from Delgado and Maria Garcia was detected on an extension cable, believed to have been used to strangle Marta. This was surprising, given the accused had consistently maintained they had only been at the crime scene early in the morning and had no knowledge of the incident. When confronted with the new evidence, Maria Garcia was accused of violating Marta's body in attempting to cover up the crime. A detailed analysis of the crime scene revealed up to 5 fingerprints on 3 alcohol bottles, with 1 belonging to El Cuco. As the investigation drew to a close, the 4 suspects were under intense scrutiny from the public. Their trials were heavily guarded by the police, and the prosecution presented a substantial case against Miguel, Samuel, Delgado, and Maria Garcia. The trial involved 90 witnesses, including national police officers and experts. The prosecution also presented 30,000 pH monitorings, crime scene photographs, DNA evidence, and other items found at the house on Leon 13. The trial sparked a massive public outcry, drawing large crowds that pushed against the police barrier. The public requested to view Marta's body and also wanted to catch a glimpse of Miguel, the accused. Despite Delgado and Maria Garcia attempting to conceal themselves with hats and sunglasses, however, they were still unable to escape the crowd's attention. A woman approached them, shouting insults, while others tried to remove their sunglasses and pushed them forward, forcing them to reveal their faces to the surrounding crowd. During the trial, El Cuco's mother gave an interview with her face covered, insisting on her son's innocence and stating that neither she nor El Cuco had any knowledge about Marta's body. Despite being labeled a liar by journalists, she received €10,000 for the interview. A key witness then came forward, a taxi driver who had given Delgado a ride on the night of the crime. The driver explained that he had been extra cautious with his passengers, as a colleague had been murdered recently. He recalled picking up a bald, bearded man matching Delgado's description, who had a plastic bag and stared at him intently. The driver stated that he dropped Delgado off on Leon's 13th Street, exactly where the crime took place, and charged him €8 for the ride. However, Delgado's defense lawyer questioned the driver's statement, pointing out that the fare for the 2-kilometer ride should have been €5, not €8, which cast doubt on the driver's testimony. Marta's parents took the stand and described the immense pain they were experiencing due to the situation. They had to quit their jobs, start taking psychiatric medication, and even develop depression. Their other 2 daughters, Marta's sisters, were also going through a terrible time. The jury's verdict in January 2012 did not bring the family the satisfaction they were hoping for. Miguel was the only person responsible for Marta's murder and was sentenced to 21 years and 3 months in prison. Additionally, he was banned from living in the city where Marta's family resides for the next 30 years. He had to pay part of the trial costs and compensate Marta's parents with €280,000 for the moral damage caused by her murder and disappearance. Each of her sisters was also awarded €30,000. In contrast, Delgado and Samuel were released due to lack of evidence placing them at the crime scene at the time of the murder. However, the following year, they demanded that Marta's family pay for the trial costs, adding to the family's distress. Marta's father expressed his intention to seek justice beyond Spain's borders, as he believed the country's system was outdated. He even considered taking Marta's case to Strasbourg, home to the European Parliament and the European Court of Human Rights. In December 2011, Marta's mother wrote a heartfelt letter to Miguel, who was in prison at the time. She asks him to return Marta's body so they can end the long suffering they have endured. She longed to give Marta a proper burial, where she could visit her, bring flowers, and talk to her. Unfortunately, the letter went unanswered. On January 24, 2012, 3 years after Marta's disappearance, demonstrations took place in various Spanish cities and towns, demanding justice for the young girl. As a result, Miguel faced threats from fellow inmates and attempted to take his own life. He was then transferred to a specialized therapy unit where he had limited contact with the outside world, including no visitors or phone calls. During his imprisonment, Miguel created multiple versions of the crime, with as many as 7 different accounts. This led to several lawyers withdrawing from his case due to inconsistencies. In his latest testimony, presented in 2013, he implicated someone close to him as the perpetrator of the crime. Miguel described an argument between him and his brother, Delgado, over the mortgage for their house at Leon 13. The dispute began when Miguel sent a letter to the family stating that he no longer wanted to cover for Delgado. Miguel stated that a disagreement over a fraudulent loan led to a physical confrontation. The situation became violent and Delgado allegedly threatened his younger brother with a weapon. When Marta intervened, she was fatally struck with the butt of Delgado's gun. After the incident, Delgado made a phone call, but the recipient and the content of the conversation are unknown. Delgado then left the house, leaving Marta's lifeless body behind. El Cuco arrived, and Delgado asked for his help in disposing of the body. They used a wheelchair to transport the body to the Mahalla farm in Laneda, where they buried it. Marta. At first, Marta's parents believed Miguel's story and were grateful to him for telling the truth. They requested that the investigation be reopened, this time focusing on Delgado. However, the prosecution and the judge did not find Marta's statements credible. Marta's father visited Miguel in prison, asking for his cooperation in finding Marta's body. In exchange for Miguel's help, Marta's father offered him a deal. Upon his release from prison, he would give Miguel the house located at Lawn 13, which he had previously purchased. The search for Marta's body became one of the most expensive in the country's history, involving extensive land and sea searches. It seemed impossible for Miguel, Samuel, and another person to transport Marta's body on a motorcycle without incident. During the reenactment, the body fell off the moment the engine started. After Miguel claimed that the body was thrown into a trash bin, the search shifted to the local landfill, which receives all the area's waste. In order to find any relevant clues, the search team estimated that they would need to remove approximately 40,000 tons of waste from the landfill due to the large amount of time that had passed since Marta's disappearance and the massive amount of waste at the landfill. The search for Marta's body lasted 32 days but was unsuccessful. Miguel, the accused, gave investigators 4 different locations where evidence might be found, leading to multiple new searches. However, the searches were hindered by a lack of funds, and at one point, the then Interior Minister Alfredo Perez had to pause the search due to financial constraints. In April 2013, Miguel pointed to Delgado as the real murderer and provided another location where Marta's body could be found, this time near the city of Lake, Canada. Despite having lost credibility due to his previous false versions, a new search was conducted. Miguel went with the police to the area and gave them a general idea of where he claimed to have buried Marta's body in 2009, along with Delgado. The police excavated the soil of 6 farms, focusing on areas with recent earth movements. A total area of 10,000 square meters was scanned, but unfortunately, nothing was found. All the searches were unsuccessful, and at the request of Marta's parents. The search was halted until 2015. The public ministry requested that the defendants compensate the Ministry of the Interior for the costs incurred during the search, amounting to $66,329. In a new development, an individual named Oscar, who claimed to be a criminal, approached El Cuco's, Rosalia's mother, and pretended to seek a confession. However, his actual intention was to infiltrate and secretly gather information. Over time, Oscar and Rosalia developed a close relationship, meeting every 2 or 3 days and speaking daily on the phone. Rosalia trusted Oscar enough to give him the keys to her house, and they shared secrets and took long walks on the beach together. He gained her trust and affection. Oscar even convinced Rosalia that they would leave the country together once her son's, El Cuco situation was resolved. Meanwhile, Oscar secretly recorded 600 hours of conversations between Rosalia and those around her over a period of 2.5 years. In October 2011, El Cuco was granted temporary release from the juvenile center, where he was being held for covering up for Miguel. During one conversation, Oscar asked El Cuco if he thought the police were following him. El Cuco replied that were, and that the police were trying to find out where they had hidden Marta. This statement incriminated El Cuco and revealed his involvement in Marta's disappearance. Realizing his mistake, El Cuco quickly tried to retract his statement, claiming he had done nothing wrong. Oscar played along as if he hadn't noticed. However, in other recordings, El Cuco made fun of the police's efforts to find the body, and Rosalia criticized the investigators for not examining her phone records closely. Although Oscar worked diligently to record conversations, the 600 hours of recorded material was not presented as evidence in court. It wasn't until 13 years after Marta's disappearance, in 2022, that the recordings led to results. On May 26, 2022, a large crowd of mostly neighbors from Marta's family gathered outside the courthouse to demonstrate their support for a new trial. Rosalia and El Cuco arrived at the courthouse, protected by police. El Cuco was fully covered, wearing a hoodie, sunglasses, gloves, and a mask. Rosalia wore sunglasses, a mask, and a headscarf. In 2011, El Cuco claimed he wasn't at the scene of the crime on Lyon 13th Street. El Cuco said he had gone home around 11:30 p.m. with friends and met his mother's partner, Oscar, who was taking out the trash. Oscar then went upstairs to his apartment and stayed there for the rest of the night. Rosalia claimed she had gone out for drinks with Oscar around 11:30 p.m. and returned home around 1:30 a.m. on January 25th, finding her son asleep. El Cuco admitted that on January 24th, Miguel contacted him for assistance after killing Marta. Miguel requested his help in burying Marta's body, along with Samuel. They used Rosalia's vehicle to travel to Lyon 13, where Delgado is also there. During this time, Rosalia, El Cuco's mother, stayed at a bar until 4:30 in the morning. Upon returning home, she found her son missing. In the end, El Cuco and Rosalia were charged with perjury for hindering prosecution. As a result, El Cuco and Rosalia were sentenced to 2.5 years in prison on June 9, 2022. The judge also imposed a fine of €1,144 on each of them, as well as ordering them to pay €30,000 in civil liability to Marta's parents. Despite the sentencing and fines, Marta's parents were more concerned with finding their daughter's body than seeking monetary compensation. In the same year, the investigative judge allowed an expert to access the mobile phones of Miguel and Marta. Notably, Miguel gave his consent for his phone to be examined, believing it would reveal evidence pointing to Delgado as the actual perpetrator. The primary objective of the investigation was to locate Marta's body, which remained missing. 13 years after Marta's murder, the civil court decided to close the investigation into the search for her body in November 2022. The court declared the investigation period had expired because no new significant evidence had been found. Marta's parents eventually accepted that Miguel would never disclose the location of their daughter's body. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Kate Waring. Kate Waring was born in Charleston, South Carolina, USA. She grew up in a loving family with 2 siblings, and her parents always tried their best to give their children the best life possible. As a child, Kate showed a deep love and compassion for animals, which led her to start volunteering at various animal shelters at a young age. As a teenager, she was a dancer and had a wide social circle, known for her positive attitude and outlook on life. Everyone assumed she had an educational good background, and to some extent, this was true. However, one fateful day, her life changed completely. Just before going to college, Kate opened up to her parents about being abused by someone close to the family when she was younger. Kate's parents were shocked by this confession. They felt guilty for not knowing the hardships their daughter had faced over the years. After learning this heartbreaking truth about their daughter, Kate's parents did everything they could to help her overcome it, but unfortunately, this traumatic experience left behind long-lasting consequences that became increasingly serious over time. Kate had struggled with addiction to both alcohol and illegal substances. Kate's parents recommended therapy to help her work through her issues, and she agreed to give it a try. They also suggested she move back in with them, thinking the family environment would aid in her recovery. Initially, the therapy seemed effective, but Kate continued to grapple with the emotional weight of her past, making it difficult for her to move forward. Kate's life underwent a major transformation when her psychiatrist diagnosed her with depression. Her father proposed a trip to anywhere in the world, which Kate eagerly accepted. She chose to travel to the Arctic Circle, driven by her long-held desire to see polar bears. Kate and her parents searched for suitable tours and eventually booked a trip. As the journey approached, Kate's parents noticed a marked change in her attitude, shifting from sadness to cheerful and positive. During the trip, Kate and her parents shared a wonderful experience, filled with joy and laughter. On the boat to the Arctic Circle, Kate met a fellow Russian tourist. They kept in touch throughout the trip, and when the trip ended, they still exchanged letters. Kate developed strong feelings for him, and eventually, which led her to make the decision to travel to Russia. Kate had finally begun to overcome her depression after traveling with her family in another country. However, due to visa issues, she was forced to return home. Despite this incident, Kate seems to have found joy in her life again. She planned to resolve her visa problems and had even started writing a book for her children. But everything changed on Saturday, June 12, 2009. Kate's family was away on a business trip, and she was alone at home. Normally, Kate would call her father to check in, but this time she didn't. Her father tried to reach her, but there was no answer. Concerned about her well-being, especially given her past struggles with addiction, her father asked someone to check on her. When the person arrived at Kate's home, they found her room empty, but the light was still on, suggesting that she had just stepped out and would return soon. However, Kate's medication, which she needed to take regularly, was still at home. Her parents were anxious, but they decided not to panic, thinking that Kate, being 28 years old, was capable of taking care of herself. They decided to wait until Monday, at which point her parents intended to contact the police. On Monday morning, Kate's father received a call from the bank. A bank employee informed him that someone had tried to cash a check for over $4,000 from Kate's account. The bank was unable to contact Kate, so they reached out to her father. This situation raised suspicions, as Kate's father knew she only had a few $100s in her account. The bank security team contacted Kate's father due to the large amount of the check. Although Kate's signature on the check appeared to be genuine, the bank still had concerns. The man who tried to cash the check was identified as Ethan Mack. Kate's father did not recognize Ethan's name, but he assumed Ethan might be an acquaintance of Kate's since the bank had verified her signature. As Kate was still unreachable, her father decided to contact the police. The police launched an investigation into Kate's disappearance and began by questioning Ethan Mack. Ethan claimed to have known Kate for years and stated that she had written the check to pay off old debts. He also claimed that he had frequently lent Kate money for various purchases, including clothing and jewelry. Investigations into Kate's disappearance led detectives to speak with her friends. They revealed that Kate had a long-standing friendship with Ethan. Although they were very close, her friends insisted that the relationship was not love. Ethan told detectives that he met Kate on Friday night and took her out for dinner at a restaurant. After dinner, he drove her home and then went about his own business. To support his alibi, Ethan showed detectives text messages he had exchanged with Kate, confirming their dinner plans. He also allowed detectives to search his home, where he lived with his mother, but nothing suspicious was found. However, the police still suspect his connection with the check and did not rule Ethan out as list of suspects. Detectives reconstructed Kate's activities on Friday night to determine her last whereabouts before she disappeared. She had seen her therapist in the afternoon and then visited the gym. Later, Kate entered a store and purchased a bottle of wine. Security footage showed her talking on the phone at the time, and it is possible that she was speaking with Ethan, who later picked her up and took her to dinner. Kate's parents remembered another unsettling detail from the day she went missing. Although she mentioned having some problems, she didn't specify what they were. Unfortunately, her parents did not remember this conversation until a few days later, and by then, the information was too late to be of any help in the search. As the weeks went by, Kate remained missing. Her parents felt frustrated with the police, believing they weren't doing enough to find Kate. However, in August, the case gained new information when a team of former police officers, led by lawyer Andy Savage, took it on. This team had been privately investigating unsolved cases and was particularly drawn to Kate's. The team consisted of 5 individuals, and all have significant experience in the investigative field. One of them, former Detective James Randall, began by examining Kate's bedroom. He noticed 2 suspicious things. Firstly, he found a packet of medication that Kate took regularly. Kate's parents confirmed that she was very diligent in taking her medication, so the fact that the packet was left behind was highly alarming. Next, a team member found Chinese currency on Kate's bed, which raised questions since Kate's parents had no idea where she got it or why she needed it. To gather more information, the team brought in Bobby Mitter, an expert in tracking individuals online. His skills are really useful. Bobby discovered that on the night Kate disappeared, she called her friend James around 10 p.m. but he didn't answer. Kate left a disturbing voicemail, saying someone had stolen her credit cards. Kate's phone was last active at 1:53 a.m., for some unknown reason, when she called her own voicemail. Further investigation by member Lewis revealed that the call was made from James Island, just a few kilometers from Kate's house. Another team member, Eugene Fraser, spoke with acquaintances on James Island and found something suspicious. Ethan Mack, who had allowed police to search his mother's home, didn't actually live there. Instead, he rented an apartment in a nearby building. Eugene's acquaintance, who happened to be Ethan's landlord, provided this crucial information. The detectives dug deeper and discovered that the police had not Ethan thoroughly investigated. They had only done a cursory search of his mother's house. The team decided to take matters into their own hands and began their own investigation. In the process, they found out that Ethan had a girlfriend named Heather Camp. When they asked Kate's parents about Heather, her mother remembered a strange encounter. About a month before Kate's disappearance, Kate had met Heather on a train from Washington, D.C., where Kate was experiencing visa issues to Russia. Heather had told Kate that she had been robbed of her wallet and was now destitute. Kate offered to help and lent her a substantial amount of money. Heather said she has found a job as a pediatric surgeon in South Carolina and will start work soon. Heather later said that her daughter had tragically died in a car accident in New Jersey. Her actions following this announcement seemed irrational and confusing. She did not go there, and her demeanor suggested that her daughter's death did not affect her greatly. Furthermore, they discovered that Heather was facing fraud charges in Indiana. She had impersonated a licensed physician by falsifying paperwork. The team gathered significant data, forcing them to re-examine the case from a new perspective. However, when they presented their findings to the police were completely reluctant to continue the investigation. The team discovered that the only way to get the police to take action was to gather undeniable proof that connected Heather to Kate's disappearance. To obtain this evidence, the team took drastic measures. They convinced the person who rented an apartment to Ethan Mack to install a hidden camera outside his apartment door. Additionally, they placed a GPS tracker in Ethan's car, allowing them to monitor his movements. Their efforts soon paid off. After analyzing Ethan's travel patterns, the detectives discovered that he had visited multiple pawn shops throughout the city. They followed his trail and found that at each shop, Ethan was selling small batches of jewelry. Although they couldn't confirm whether the jewelry belonged to Kate, the detectives felt they were closing in on a crucial lead. The group then hits a major roadblock when Ethan and Heather's landlord threatens to evict them because they haven't paid their rent. This made the detectives' investigation difficult, as losing access to the apartment would hinder their ability to monitor Ethan and Heather's activities. To address this issue, the detectives devised a plan to persuade the landlord to grant Ethan and Heather an extension on their rent payment. In exchange, the landlord required both Ethan and Heather to sign a contract committing to pay the outstanding debt. The team successfully negotiated this arrangement, and once the contract was signed, they immediately sent it to the laboratory for analysis. The primary objective was to compare the handwriting on the contract with Kate's signature on the $4,000 check. The results yielded a significant breakthrough. The handwriting expert confirmed, with absolute certainty, that the signature on the check matched Heather's handwriting on the contract. The team discovered that Heather had forged Kate's signature. However, they knew the police would be uncooperative, so they devised a new plan. They convinced the landlord to help them by telling Ethan that the apartment needed insect treatment. The team leader, dressed as an exterminator, accompanied the landlord to the apartment. But their plan almost failed. They realized Ethan only moved the car away from the house and did not actually leave. Upon entering the apartment, the investigator and the landlord were met with an unexpected surprise. Ethan was still at home, and Heather was the one driving his car. The investigator then had to think quickly and adjust his plan. They insist that the apartment needs to be disinfected and ask Ethan to wait outside while they spray the dangerous disinfectant. Ethan, unaware of the investigation, agreed to leave his apartment. Meanwhile, investigators begin searching for evidence to prove Ethan's involvement in Kate's disappearance. They found Ethan's backpack and examined its contents. Discovering Chinese money, it resembles the bills found on Kate's bed. However, the search yielded no other significant clues. The investigator and the landlord pretended to complete their task and left. The team needed a new strategy. After reviewing the footage from the camera outside Ethan's apartment, they noticed a man frequently entering the building, Terry Williams, a neighbor of the couple. The detective suspected that Terry might have information about Ethan and Heather's involvement in Kate's disappearance. The team decided to take a risk and offered Terry a substantial sum of money in exchange for his cooperation. They visited Terry's apartment with the offer, hoping he would reveal what he knew about Kate's disappearance. Detectives encountered an unexpected situation when they told Terry what was happening. Unbeknownst to them, Heather was at her home and overheard the conversation between the detectives and Terry. When the detectives started talking to Terry, Heather was extremely frightened. She immediately called Ethan and explained the situation in a hysterical state. The investigation team did not expect this, and they spent the next few days coming up with another plan. However, Terry later contacted the detectives and invited them to his home to discuss. Upon arriving at Terry's apartment, he reveals that although Ethan and Heather did not directly tell him about their involvement in Kate's disappearance, but he had suspected that the couple had done something wrong to Kate. Terry then produced an iPod that Heather had given him shortly after Kate's disappearance. He had assumed the iPod belonged to Kate. The detectives examined the device and, using its serial number, confirmed that it indeed belonged to Kate. This discovery provided the investigation team with sufficient evidence to return to the police department. The local police could no longer ignore the case and decided to take action. After reviewing the evidence gathered by the team, they arrested Ethan and Heather. During the initial interrogation, Heather agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claimed Kate's body was on Wat Allah Island, approximately 20 miles from her house. However, when the police searched the area, they found no of Kate's body. It became clear that Heather had given them false information. Andy Savage then tried a different approach, suspecting Heather's direct involvement in Kate's murder. He met with her and offered a deal. In exchange for revealing Kate's body location, he would help get her off the forgery charges papers. Heather, seeing this as her only chance, agreed to the deal. She provided a detailed description of the location on the outskirts of Wat Allah Island, claiming Kate's body was still there. The detectives decided to search the area without police accompaniment, but they were initially disappointed when they found nothing. However, they returned the next day, and they eventually discovered Kate's body. The forensic doctors were unable to determine the cause of Kate's death. But the truth eventually came to light when Heather began to confess. In August 2009, Heather signed a confession admitting to murder, obstruction of justice, and bank check forgery. The police investigation revealed that Heather had been committing fraud for years and had targeted Kate as her next victim during a trip from Washington. Heather later met Ethan and started a romantic relationship with him. Ethan, however, did not immediately plead guilty, and his trial began in October 2010. The prosecution used Heather's testimony to reconstruct the incident surrounding Kate's disappearance. According to Heather's account, on the day Kate vanished, Kate discovered that Heather had deceived her and stolen her credit cards. Kate threatened to inform her father. Heather confided in Ethan, who chose to support her despite his long-standing friendship with Kate. The investigation revealed that Kate was not alone with Ethan on the night she disappeared. Heather was also present. It appears that Heather and Ethan attempted to negotiate with Kate at a restaurant, trying to persuade Kate not to expose Heather's deception. During this meeting, Heather may have promised Kate that when she got to Ethan's apartment, Heather would return the stolen credit card to her. Upon Kate's arrival, Heather and Ethan may have been waiting for the right moment to end her life. However, the court ultimately questioned Heather's account of the incident and found her guilty, sentencing her to 39 years in prison. Ethan received a slightly more lenient sentence of 25 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alicia Ross. Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980, in the Canadian city of Markham, in the province of Ontario. There's no information about her biological parents. All that's known is that they gave up their rights over the girl, and she was adopted a few months later by a couple named Marvin and Sharon Ross. Her adoptive parents surrounded her with love and care, doing everything they could to ensure their daughter lacked for nothing and could fully develop her talents. When Alicia started going to school, her adoptive parents decided to get divorced, but they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to support together in their daughter's life. Shortly after, Sharon remarried, and her new husband, named Julius Forrest, treated her as if she were his own daughter. Alicia did well in school, excelled at drawing, and also had a passion for photography, enjoying discovering new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia, where she traveled and enjoyed life before returning home and enrolling in university. In the summer of 2005, Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains with her friends. She enjoyed spending time in nature, away from the busy city life. During the trip, she met a 29-year-old man named Sean, and they started a romantic relationship. The age difference of 4 years did not bother the couple. At the time, Alicia still lived in her adoptive parents' home, occupying the basement with a separate entrance, which allowed her to live independently from her parents. On August 16th, Alicia took a walk in the park with her adoptive mother and their dogs. Alicia seemed happy and shared that she was about to be promoted to the position of senior sales manager at work. She was very proud as she had been working hard for a long time, and her efforts were finally paying off. Additionally, Alicia talked to her mother about her boyfriend, Sean, whom she had been dating for just over a month but she seemed deeply in love with. Alicia hoped that this romance could develop into something more significant in the future and expressed a desire to introduce Sean to her adoptive parents by arranging a family dinner. After a stroll through the park, Sharon headed home, and Alicia went out on a date with her sweetheart, promising not to stay out too late because she had to get up early for work the next day. They said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. After meeting with Sean, Alicia invited him to her house. They had a good time together, and around midnight, he went home. Alicia accompanied him to the door, which served as a second exit from the backyard. They said goodbye with a kiss, and then he left, promising to call her as soon as he got home. Around midnight, as promised, Sean called his girlfriend, but she didn't answer the phone. He wasn't too worried, thinking that Alicia had simply fallen asleep since she had to get up early for work. However, the next morning, when he tried to call her again and she still didn't answer, he genuinely became concerned and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office as Alicia. From her, he learned that Alicia had not gone to work, and he immediately rushed to her house. On the morning of August 17th, Sharon and Julius left their home around 10 a.m. to play golf with friends. They noticed their daughter's car in the driveway but assumed a colleague had picked her up, so they didn't think much of it and continued with their plans. About half an hour later, Sean arrived at the Ross residence and, finding no sign of Alicia there, he called the police to report her as a missing person. Sean also immediately contacted Sharon to inform her of the situation. Sharon and Julius rushed home immediately after hearing the news. By the time they arrived, the police were already present at the scene. Sean was the first person to notice the girl's disappearance and inform the authorities. Sean was also the last person to see Alicia alive and well the evening before she vanished. According to Sean, they had said goodbye at the gate where his car was parked around midnight, and she had not been in touch since then. When Sharon and Julius reached the house, law enforcement was already there, investigating the area and speaking with Sean, who had called them. Sean appeared visibly nervous and distraught. When the mother checked Alicia's room, she noticed that all of her daughter's personal belongings were still in their place. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, bank cards, and cash were all left behind. The gate was open but not forced, suggesting that she either let her abductor in or willingly left the yard with someone. In the backyard, the police found some signs of disturbance. The lawn and flowers in one spot were trampled, as if someone had fallen there. Additionally, a pair of cigarettes and Alicia's right sandal, which she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, and Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand. Sean was considered the prime suspect almost immediately. At first, he was clearly very nervous and his narration seemed a bit confusing and disjointed. Second, he was the first to report his girlfriend's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they hadn't seen her either. Therefore, he definitely knew she was missing. Moreover, the authorities found biological traces of Sean and her on her bed. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia may have rejected Sean's advances, and he decided to force himself on her, then trying to cover his tracks, and staging her disappearance, which likely resulted in her losing her life. Sean was brought to the police station and questioned. The investigator presented their theory to him, which left the young man stunned. He was dismayed to be the prime suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend, as he loved her. Sean admitted they had intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. Her parents had nothing bad to say about Sean. He hadn't argued with their daughter, hadn't mistreated her, and she spoke only well of him. Their relationship was progressing rapidly and quite happily, and Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. It's understandable that the parents are deeply concerned about their daughter's disappearance. The facts known so far suggest that she had no plans or reasons to leave her apartment. She was looking forward to a promotion at her workplace, and as a responsible person, it's unlikely she would have just abandoned everything. Even if there had been unforeseen circumstances, she would have surely informed her parents and taken her documents, money, and phone with her. The police couldn't find sufficient evidence to arrest Sean, so he was released after questioning. However, the investigators haven't completely ruled out Sean as a suspect and are continuing to monitor him. Sean himself seemed depressed and very disturbed. An intensive search for Alicia began the day after she went missing. Initially, a thorough inspection of the house and yard was conducted. Investigators examined the surrounding area in detail and interviewed neighbors. However, no one reported having heard or seen anything suspicious that night. The authorities theorized that the woman disappeared sometime between midnight, when she said goodbye to Sean, and dawn, a time when the streets are usually quiet and deserted, making it difficult to find witnesses. Flyers with Alicia's photos were distributed throughout the city, listing the phone numbers where people could provide any information about her whereabouts. The search for Alicia became one of the most extensive operations in the history of Ontario. Every rugged terrain, ravine, and swampy area were examined, but no clues, leads, or even suggestions about the whereabouts of the missing woman were found. Her parents also appealed to the public through the media, expressing their belief that their daughter was still alive but was being held against her will somewhere. They implored whoever had their daughter to let her return home unharmed and not to do her any harm. The police leaned towards the theory that someone Alicia knew personally had kidnapped her and possibly ended her life. This hypothesis was supported by the lack of signs of struggle, the absence of evidence of entry, and the fact that the door had been left open, but no concrete clues were found. The cigarette found on the floor had only a very smudged fingerprint that could not be identified. Investigators thoroughly reviewed Alicia's contacts and analyzed all calls and messages from her phone and email, but nothing suspicious was uncovered. On the 6th day of the search, the case was officially classified as a criminal offense, even though there was a lack of evidence, and Sean remained the main suspect. Sean lived alone in his own house about 10 miles from Alicia's house. After realizing that public suspicion had increased following his media appearance, he no longer participated in the search and refused to speak to the press. The investigators questioned Sean 3 more times, but his story remained consistent. He was then offered a lie detector test, which he refused, further convincing the police that he was involved in the crime. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge. He was pulled over late at night for driving under the influence and resisting arrest. Speculation arose that he was drowning his guilt in alcohol. After Sean's arrest, Alicia's parents gave another interview, sharing that they had not met him personally and only knew of him through their daughter's stories. They believed she was happy, but now Sharon considered the possibility that she may have withheld certain details to avoid upsetting them, despite having planned to introduce her boyfriend to her family soon. The police interviewed Sean's neighbors to determine if they had noticed anything unusual recently, such as him disposing of large trash bags, behaving suspiciously, leaving unexpectedly, or washing his car. However, these investigations did not yield any significant information. The detectives were left hoping that Sean would eventually confess everything. About a month after Alicia's disappearance, there was an unexpected development in the case. The initial media attention surrounding her case began to wane, and the search efforts continued but were no longer prominently featured in news reports. The investigation appeared to have reached a dead end. Then, on September 20th, 2005, more than a month after Alicia went missing, a completely unexpected twist occurred. A 31-year-old local resident named Daniel contacted the police and confessed to ending Alicia's life, providing the location where he had hidden her body. It's important to note that this man was never under suspicion, and the police had not considered him at all during their investigation. Initially, it seemed that the man simply craved fame and attention, and therefore decided to take responsibility for the most notorious case in recent years. However, all doubts were dispelled when the police found her body in the location he had indicated. Before delving into who this new person of interest was, let's examine why the police had not shown any interest in him previously. Daniel was an unemployed inmate who lived in his mother's house, which was adjacent to the Alicia family's home. Their house were separated by unkempt shrubs, forming an almost impenetrable barrier. Although the criminal and the victim had lived practically their entire lives right next to each other, they had never interacted before. Alicia had observed Daniel behaving in an unusual manner on his house, leading her to believe he might be mentally unwell. Daniel had experienced significant socialization issues from a young age. He lacked friends, was mocked at school, and all his attempts to form relationships were unsuccessful, causing him to develop a deep resentment towards women. As a child, girls had rejected him, calling him a loser and refusing to associate with him. At the age of 8, Daniel was diagnosed with a socializing behavioral disorder and had been receiving ongoing psychological treatment. Although therapy did not significantly improve his condition, during his teenage years, he confessed to having fantasies of suddenly attacking and overpowering a girl, which excited him. However, specialists remained confident that these fantasies would remain within his imagination. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions and decided not to continue his education. He became a recluse, living in his mother's house and isolating himself from the outside world. Daniel spent most of his days in his room, often visiting adult websites. Occasionally, he would venture out in the evenings to secretly observe his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He seemed particularly interested in watching when someone was engaged in intimate activities, which excited him. Daniel initially claimed that Alicia's death was accidental and he hid the body to avoid punishment. He said that when he realized she showed no signs of life, he placed her body in the trunk of his mother's car and drove about 50 miles out of town, hiding it in a bushy ravine by the side of a country road. 3 weeks later, fearing the body would be discovered, he moved it in the middle of the night to a deserted area. The body was found in the place Daniel indicated, confirming Daniel's guilt. The condition of the remains suggested the girl had been treated with extreme cruelty. Alicia seemed to have been hit by a vehicle. The forensic examination revealed that she had almost all of her ribs broken, her neck and both arms fractured, and extensive closed head trauma with internal bleeding. The exact cause of death could not be determined. The forensic experts were surprised, as they had never seen anything like it before. It was necessary to clarify all the circumstances and the timeline of events that fateful night to precisely determine how Alicia suffered such injuries. Initially, the convicted man claimed he had had an argument with his neighbor on a path covered in bushes between their houses. At some point during the verbal altercation, she called him a loser, which angered him, and he struck her in the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. When he realized she wasn't breathing, he decided to hide the body and then moved it again when the search area expanded. However, there was something in his story that didn't add up. There were missing details and specifics. For example, it wasn't clear what Daniel was doing at his neighbor's house at night, why they started arguing, what caused such a brutal beating, and why the evidence found at the scene was arranged in a straight line. Restoring the full picture of events was challenging, but law enforcement managed to do so. That evening, Daniel went to spy on his neighbors. He noticed that Alicia's boyfriend had come over, so he approached their house closely. As the couple was being intimate, he watched them from a window. Then he moved back to the bushes but did not leave. Closer to midnight, the lovers went outside and kissed by the gate, just a couple of feet away from the lurking neighbor. When Sean left, the girl returned to the yard and noticed Daniel. She became very angry, realizing that he had been spying on her and her boyfriend all this time. She started yelling at him, calling him a pervert, and demanded that he leave immediately. Finally, Alicia called him a loser, after which she turned around and was about to go back into the house. This is a very disturbing and violent incident. The victim was subjected to a brutal physical assault, with the perpetrator striking her numerous times in the head, neck, chest, and back, causing extensive injuries and internal bleeding. After realizing the victim had died, the perpetrator moved the body to his garage, stripped her naked, and masturbated. He then placed the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and transported it to a remote location outside the city. This sequence of events indicates a severe lack of empathy and disregard for human life. The language used is graphic and unsettling, but necessary to convey the gravity of the situation. Upon returning to his home, the criminal took a shower, changed his clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. His clothes, as well as the personal belongings of the victim and the towels he used to clean the crime scene, were bagged and disposed of. The trial and sentencing only began in April 2007, when new details were made public. The accused confessed to having taken the life of his neighbor, but he and his lawyer insisted that it was an involuntary act. Additionally, the defense requested a psychiatric evaluation, indicating that Daniel was ill and should not be considered responsible for his actions, suggesting that he should be treated in a clinic rather than incarcerated. However, the prosecution argued that, despite his mental illness and issues with anger management, Daniel acted with full awareness of the consequences of his actions. He ruthlessly kicked Alicia with all his might, knowing that this would likely result in her death. Nevertheless, the court-ordered psychiatric evaluation confirmed that the accused could be fully responsible for his actions. Regarding the items found in the backyard, Daniel never admitted to having placed them in a straight line. On May 7, 2007, Daniel Sylvester was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. A year later, Canadian singer-songwriter Kathleen Edwards wrote a song titled Alicia Ross, which portrayed the events from the perspective of Alicia during the final moments of her life. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Brittany McGlone. Brittany McGlone was born in 1987 to Gary and Patricia McGlone in Gordo, New Mexico. When she was young, the family moved to Winsport, a small town in northwest Texas with fewer than 4,000 residents. After the move, her parents divorced, and Brittany stayed with her mother. Her father later remarried and had 6 sons and 1 daughter. Brittany formed a close bond with her half-younger sister, Hope, who was 3 years younger. Although they lived in different states, the 2 sisters often talked on the phone and cherished spending time together during the holidays. Brittany was a kind, happy girl with a great sense of humor and an optimistic outlook on life. She helped her mother with housework, cared for her sick grandmother, and visited her father to help care for her half-siblings. Brittany graduated from high school in 2006 and worked 2 jobs at different stores. She intended to save money to attend nursing school. Unfortunately, her plans were cut short when she was tragically murdered. At the time, she was in a relationship with Jeff Stogner, her first love. However, Jeff had a history of using illegal drugs, and he was known for being rude, tough, and rebellious. Despite her family's concerns and her mother's warnings about dating someone like him, Brittany continued the relationship. Their relationship was often tumultuous, marked by frequent arguments, and Jeff subjected Brittany to both physical and emotional abuse. Brittany ended her relationship with Jeff in April 2007, but they stayed in touch. By May, they got back together, which upset her mother. On the morning of Friday, May 4, 2007, Brittany finished her shift early at 7 a.m. She informed her mother that she would go directly to Jeff's house to sleep after her night shift, as Jeff had requested her to come over right away. Normally, Brittany would come home first, shower, rest, and have lunch before visiting him. Patricia was surprised by the sudden change in her daughter's plans but accepted it. Brittany arrived at Jeff's house before 8 a.m., where his family was present, including his parents, siblings, and his sister's boyfriend, Chad Carr. Shortly after she arrived, Jeff's mother went to work, his siblings left with their children, and Jeff and his stepfather headed to the Dallas-Fort Worth area to pick up Brittany's grandparents. Brittany laid down to sleep, needing to rest before going to work. While she slept, her mother, Patricia, kept trying to call her, but Brittany didn't answer. After 8 a.m., Patricia assumed her daughter was still sleeping and didn't think much of it. Around 3 p.m., Jeff called Brittany's house. Patricia answered the phone and Jeff asked if Brittany was home. Patricia was surprised and replied that Brittany wasn't home. Worried, she hung up and started calling Brittany's cell phone, but all the calls went straight to voicemail. Despite trying several times, Brittany didn't answer. Patricia was confused and worried because her daughter wasn't answering her phone. Patricia called Jeff again, and he explained that Brittany had been at his house when he left and was sound asleep. He assured her that Brittany was probably still sleeping and hadn't heard the calls. Patricia then asked why he had invited Brittany over if he planned to leave, but Jeff didn't respond. As he arrived home, he spotted Brittany's car and reassured Patricia that she was with him. Feeling relieved, Patricia asks him to tell Brittany to call her mother when she wakes up. That day, Patricia did not receive any calls from Jeff or her daughter. Later, 2 police officers knocked on her door. When she answered, they inquired about someone named Brenda or Debbie. Patricia didn't recognize those names, so the officers left, leaving her feeling unsettled. Worried, she called the sheriff to find out why the police had visited and who they were looking for. The sheriff asked her to stay home and promised that they would return. Eventually, the police clarified that they had mixed up the names and informed Patricia that Brittany was dead. Her body had been taken to a funeral home. Shocked, Patricia tried to get more information from the officers, but they would not share any details. Immediately, she feared that Jeff had harmed her daughter. Determined to know the truth, she went to the funeral home to identify Brittany's body and learn what had happened. There, she discovered that her daughter had been brutally murdered in her sleep. Overwhelmed by the news, Patricia could only think about her warnings to her daughter to avoid dangerous people. Eventually, Patricia began pressing the police for answers about the events at Jeff's house and her daughter's death. Jeff reported that when he arrived home, he found her car still parked outside. He assumed she was still asleep. However, when Jeff entered his bedroom, he discovered a horrifying scene. Brittany, covered in blood, and lying motionless on the bed. He quickly called 911 to report what he had seen. Patricia did not believe the story and decided to call Jeff herself. While waiting for answers, she demanded to know the truth. Jeff repeated the same story to her. Patricia then asked why he hadn't called her immediately to inform her about the murder. He explained that he was afraid to share such alarming news. When the police arrived, they assured that they would notify the relatives of the victim. Brittany's family was devastated by the news. Forensic experts began investigating the crime scene. Even experienced police officers were shocked by the brazen murder, as they had never seen anything like it before. Blood was everywhere in the room, seeping through the mattress and spreading across the floor. Forensic experts collected DNA samples from the scene, but they could not find a murder weapon, nor any signs of forced entry. This suggested that Brittany had let the attacker into the house, or the door was unlocked. Jeff was unsure whether the door was actually closed. He speculated that they may have left the back door open, a common occurrence in their sleepy town. Her work clothes were neatly folded next to the bed, but her pajamas and underwear were missing. It was reported that the perpetrator had torn off her clothes and raped her. Brittany's autopsy revealed severe head injuries. The medical examiner determined that Brittany had been beaten to death, with the cause of death being blunt force trauma, possibly a crowbar. Since no defensive wounds were found on her body, it was suggested that Brittany had been asleep during the attack and was unable to defend herself. It was also confirmed that she had been raped. The crime was believed to have a sexual motive. Jeff's DNA was found at the crime scene because he lived in the house, where his family often visited him. His friends also frequently came over, leaving their DNA in his room. The presence of multiple DNA samples made the investigation more complicated, and Jeff became the main suspect. He and his father discovered the girl's body and were the last people to see her alive, leading police to have many questions for him. Jeff was taken to the station for questioning. He shared his background with the police and insisted he was not involved in the murder. However, he was arrested for a different offense because he was on parole and had violated its terms. At that time, he was not charged with Brittany's murder. Police interviewed Patricia's mother to gather information about Brittany's relationship with Jeff. She explained that they had only been dating for 6 months, during which time they often argued. Jeff sometimes used drugs, which caused him to distance himself from her. His mother did not approve of their relationship. At one point, the couple broke up, but they later reconciled because Brittany loved him deeply and felt she could not live without him. Their relationship was toxic and unhealthy. On Tuesday, May 8, 2007, Brittany's family chose not to have a closed casket for her funeral due to the severe injuries on her face. They kindly requested that Jeff and his family stay away from the ceremony, believing he was involved in her death. However, Jeff ignored this request and attended the funeral with his family. They were not allowed to attend the ceremony, leading to an argument between Jeff's family and Brittany's relatives. This behavior upset Brittany's family and made the ceremony worse. Jeff tried to share how he had trouble sleeping in the blood-soaked bed after Brittany's murder. Brittany's family was furious and believed he was involved in the case. However, Jeff was later cleared of all suspicion. He and his father passed a lie detector test, and his alibi was confirmed by witnesses, surveillance cameras, and cell phone records. Police discovered that Jeff's phone had connected to another cell tower and his image was captured on surveillance cameras at 2 gas stations. The exact time of the Brittany's death is unclear. According to the timeline, Brittany was killed during the 7 hours when Jeff was not at home. However, there were periods when Jeff's whereabouts were unknown. He could have returned home at any time to kill Brittany or may have killed her earlier in the morning before leaving to create an alibi. The mother was unable to reach her daughter by phone that morning but thought nothing of it, assuming Brittany was still asleep, though she might have already been dead. Additionally, it raised suspicions that Jeff stopped at 2 gas stations located next to each other. The family believed he did this to ensure at least 1 gas station's surveillance cameras captured him, providing a potential alibi. Because of this, they felt his alibi was unreliable. Jeff's behavior that day was odd to them, and they questioned why he suddenly called Brittany to his place early in the morning. Why would he want her to sleep alone at his house when he was leaving? She could have stayed at his house, and they could have met up later. That doesn't make sense. Plus, Brittany's family suspects others, especially Chad Carr, Jeff's sister's boyfriend. They were also in the house the morning of the murder. Chad and Jeff's sister were out somewhere together, but he has no alibi. Chad knew that Jeff's family often left the back door open, and that day he went home, showered, changed clothes, and then went back to Jeff's house. Why would he need to change clothes in broad daylight and he had never done so before? Most importantly, he had problems with the law. He was involved in robberies and had once attacked and severely beaten his ex-wife, which resulted in him serving 4 years in prison. At the time he was in prison, his wife had divorced him, so Brittany's family suspected that he was involved in the murder. Brittany's family asked the police to check on this guy, and he was summoned for questioning. Chad denied any involvement in the crime and was offered a polygraph test, which he agreed to take but failed. However, this failure was not considered evidence, so he was released. At that time, the police had no evidence against Jeff and Chad, and they were not even regarded as suspects. Chad's ex-wife, Britt, contacted the police, alleging that he had abused her. It was revealed that in 2006, he had been released from prison and asked Britt to bring their child to him. She complied, but Chad reacted violently, attacking her with a baton, kidnapping their daughter, and raping Britt. She later filed a complaint, which resulted in Chad being imprisoned for 8 years. After Brittany's murder, Britt viewed Chad as cruel and aggressive, believing he was capable of killing. Brittany's family overlooked Jeff's strange social media posts and inappropriate jokes about murders, which seemed to mock Brittany's memory. It raised suspicion when Jeff's family moved to another house and the murder scene was demolished. Brittany's family thought this indicated they were hiding something, leading them to suspect the demolition was a way to obscure the truth. There were allegations that Jeff had been dealing drugs from that house. It's possible Brittany discovered this or threatened to report him, which might have made her a target for elimination as a witness. Brittany's family called for justice from the police, but the investigation stalled and the case went cold. Initially, the police mishandled the evidence collection at the crime scene and allowed Jeff's family to enter the house, contaminating the area. They also failed to investigate around the house or search the nearby lake for the murder weapon. In 2017, the sheriff and his deputy were charged with falsifying evidence and providing false testimony, leading to their removal from office. In December 2021, a new sheriff was elected. He met with Brittany's family and assured them that he would do his best to hold the criminal accountable for his actions. The new sheriff announced that his team was engaging with several parties involved in the case. The Brittany family felt hopeful that the criminals would be caught and punished. The sheriff and his deputies maintained regular communication with the family, keeping them updated on the investigation. Although Jeff's home, where the crime occurred, had been torn down, the sheriff stated that evidence, including blood stains and DNA, was collected on the first day of the investigation. He planned to re-examine this evidence using modern technology to find answers. The sheriff also intends to re-interview Jeff's entire family and other people involved and seek assistance from local residents. At the time, Jeff was not considered a suspect and was actively cooperating with the police, providing his alibi. Chad was released from prison in November 2020 after serving time again. On September 1, 2022, he was arrested in Dallas, 15 years after the murder of Brittany McGlone. He faces charges for her murder, and the death penalty is a potential outcome. Police collected evidence from Chad's home, including several items such as a pair of white shorts with blood stains, a gray ski mask, and 2 pairs of women's panties. The police chief stated that both old and new evidence contributed to Chad's recent arrest. Throughout the investigation, police always determined that Chad was the perpetrator, as all the evidence pointed to him. However, the specifics of this evidence have not been revealed. Chad is currently in jail awaiting trial and is facing the death penalty. Jeff maintains that he was not involved in Brittany's murder and believes that the accusations have destroyed his life. Many people view him as a murderer, which he finds hard to cope with. His personal life is challenging. He divorced his wife because he cannot move on from Brittany. However, Brittany's family does not believe Jeff's claims. They describe him as a narcissist who only loves himself and think that he tries to gain sympathy by portraying himself as a victim. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren McCluskey. Since she was a child, Lauren McCluskey has been a very talented person. She dances, sings, and is an excellent track and field athlete. She has won many medals and awards. Eventually, she received an offer from the University of Utah and left her hometown of Pullman, Washington, to start a new life in Salt Lake City. At the university, she participates in athletics competitions, including the 100-meter dash, hurdles, high jump, shot put, long jump, javelin throw, and 800-meter run. Her talent made her one of the standout athletes on the university team. Besides, she also studies well in the communication department and makes friends with many people. However, in September 2018, her life took a tragic turn. On a Friday evening, Lauren and her friends decided to go dancing and have drinks at a small club near the University of Utah. During the evening, a man caught her attention. As the night wound down, he introduced himself as Sean Phillips, saying he worked as a security guard at the club and was also a student at Salt Lake Community College. He was 28 years old. despite their age difference, but they quickly found common ground. His charm and interest in her drew her in, and they exchanged phone numbers, planning to meet again the following day to spend more time together. Lauren felt very happy to meet Sean. She even called her mother, Jill McCluskey, to tell her about him. Sean gives her flowers at dinner, tries to be charming and gently proposes. He was tall, muscular, handsome, and very sociable guy. He quickly found common ground with Lauren, an energetic and friendly girl. He often stayed overnight in her dorm room, and she even let him borrow her car. However, some concerning behaviors began to surface. Initially, Sean encouraged Lauren to invite her friends to their gatherings, but then, he started telling her how to dress, usually in a t-shirt and jeans. When she was with her friends, he would constantly call, asking where she was, who she was with, and when she would return. If she didn't respond immediately, he would become upset. Lauren explained to friends that Sean's behavior stemmed from insecurities caused by past relationships and believed that over time, this would improve. Sean begins to explain to Lauren the importance of being careful around others and always being prepared for unfortunate situations that may arise. He bought her a can of pepper spray and insisted she carry it everywhere. He also took her to a shooting range and asked her to purchase a gun for him. Around this time, Lauren cut off all communication with her friends and spent all her time outside of school with Sean, focusing solely on training with him. Concerned, her friends reached out to the dorm staff where she lived. The staff, already uneasy about Sean's frequent presence in the dorms, grew even more alarmed when they discovered that he was tracking Lauren's movements on campus, monitoring her comings and goings. It became evident that he was not just overly jealous but was attempting to control and manipulate Lauren's life. Something was clearly wrong. As it turned out, Sean was not who he had introduced himself to be. One day, Lauren accidentally saw a photo of his ID card and learned the truth. Sean Phillips was not a 28-year-old college student or the kind, trustworthy person he pretended to be. His real name was Melvin Sean Rowland, and in fact he is 38 years old, born in 1981. He was skilled at fabricating stories and concealing his true identity. Investigators later uncovered several women who had been deceived by his lies in different ways. Unknowingly, Lauren had become one of his victims. After seeing his ID card, she begins to realize the truth about him. Melvin's true identity came to light on October 5th when Lauren returned to her home in Pullman, Washington. She confided in a friend, sharing everything that had happened. The friend suggested searching online for information about Melvin Sean Rowland. The search revealed alarming details. Melvin was a sex offender. In 2004, he was convicted of luring a minor and attempting to forcibly harass her. He spent 9 years in state prison and was released on parole in September 2013. Realizing the truth, Lauren knew she had to end the relationship with him. Lauren returns to college in Utah and makes plans to break up with Melvin. On October 9th, she called and asked him to come over. When he arrived, the planned breakup didn't happen, and he stayed the night in Lauren's room. She later told her friends that Melvin had apologized for lying about himself and explained an incident involving a false age claim by a girl at a fraternity party. He insisted that the other allegations against him were untrue. Lauren's friends were doubtful of his story and urged her to end the relationship, which she did the following day. Afterward, Lauren called her mother to explain what had happened. She mentioned that she planned to meet Melvin that evening to get her car back. Her mother, Jill, grew very concerned about the situation. Worrying about her daughter's safety, Jill contacted campus police to inform them and asked them to keep an eye on Lauren while she got her car back. Jill felt uneasy and deeply anxious. Jill dreading the idea of Melvin, who seemed to bring trouble into Lauren's life, being anywhere near she. Lauren was able to pick up her car without any issues, and both she and Melvin carried on with their lives. After that, she had a short period of peace. She focused on her studies and began to rebuild her routine. However, this peace is soon broken by messages sent from unknown phone numbers, all referencing Melvin. Concerned, she contacted the police, leaving a message with the operator, but no one got back to her that day. Then a message arrived from Melvin's number, saying he was fine, but hinting that something strange was happening. Soon after, messages from anonymous numbers continued to arrive, affirmed that they were in possession of sensitive photos of Lauren and Melvin. The sender demanded $10,000, threatening to release the photos online if they do not receive the money. On the morning of October 13th, Melvin emailed Lauren, revealing that he was also being blackmailed. He advised her to pay the money, so she sent $10,000 to the unknown blackmailer. However, she began to suspect that Melvin himself might be behind the blackmail rather than an unknown party. Feeling insecure, she contacted the University of Utah police. The dispatcher forwarded her complaint to Miguel Dasso, a University of Utah police officer. Wanting to address the situation directly, Lauren and her friend walked across campus to speak with the officer in person. When they arrived, they met with the police and told the whole story, including giving Melvin's name and that he was a sex offender. Police believe this was a hoax and that Lauren may have made up the story about the death threat. Lauren and her friend believed that they had taken the necessary steps and that the problem would soon be resolved. Unfortunately, almost no action was taken. Officer Miguel received copies of the messages and images involved, even adding one of the photos to his personal collection. He later bragged to another officer that he could now view it whenever he wanted. Lauren received no follow-up from the university police despite her repeated calls to the station, during which she explained to the dispatcher that she was being blackmailed again. In October, near Lauren's dorm, Melvin was spotted loitering in the parking lot, wearing a suit. About 45 minutes later, she returned to her dorm after track practice. At the time, no one knew who Melvin was. She entered the dorm and went upstairs. Shortly afterward, Melvin, now dressed as Deadpool, approached the dorm door. He later claimed he knew Lauren had called the police, leading her to suspect that someone at the police department had informed him about the situation. Lauren had forgotten that a few weeks ago, she had used Melvin's phone to log in and check her email. This gave him access to her communications with the police, friends, and family without her realizing it. She contacted the Salt Lake City police, hoping they could connect her with another department for assistance. However, under the jurisdictional rules, police said they were not of much help, as their jurisdiction was limited to campus. This also prevents Officer Miguel from taking action outside of campus. Additionally, some have suggested that Lauren's assumption that someone in the police department had leaked information to Melvin may make her paranoid. Phone records revealed that she called both police departments multiple times over several days, desperately seeking a solution. On October 22nd, the situation took a dire turn. CCTV footage showed Melvin leaving his apartment at 6 a.m. He rented a car from his neighbor and drove to the parking lot in front of Lauren's dorm, arriving at 9 a.m. He walked toward the building just as she was leaving her dorm. Around that time, she received a text message, supposedly from Deputy Chief McLennan of the University Police, asking her to come to the station to review evidence. Sensing something was off, she ignored the message and instead went to meet with a counselor, who had been helping her deal with the breakup and its aftermath. At that time, Melvin was in the same building as Lauren. He was carrying a small suitcase. He was looking for she but couldn't find her, so he went to her dorm instead. There, he managed to gain access. Once inside, he spoke with a group of 4 students. Over time, 3 of them left, leaving 1 student behind. The remaining student later told police that Melvin asked if he wanted to see what was inside the suitcase. Inside was a .40 caliber Beretta pistol and a full magazine. He even let the student handle the gun before leaving. Meanwhile, Lauren had finished her evening class and was preparing to return to her dorm. It had been a difficult week, so she decided to call her parents and take a short walk across campus while talking to them. At the same time, Melvin left the dorm, intending to intercept her on her usual route back. As Lauren walked, she told her parents about her day, and they listened closely. Suddenly, they heard her scream as Melvin began chasing her. Her father, Matthew, immediately called 911. Melvin grabbed Lauren, forced her into the car with a gun and pushed her into the back seat. Then, he shooting her 7 times at close range. After opening fire, he drove through the parking lot, crossed the bridge and continued straight to the nearest subway station in Salt Lake. There, he waited calmly at a bus stop and made a phone call, having already arranged for someone to pick him up. A woman eventually arrived, and he got into her car. The two went out for dinner and took a walk around a nearby building, attempting to appear as though they were casually spending time together, likely to create an alibi for the time of the murder. Meanwhile, police began searching the area. This side, Lauren's parents are dying to know what's going on with their daughter. Students and volunteers began searching west of a North Medical Tower. A team of 6 officers, along with a police dog, joined the search, moving north. Eventually, they discovered Lauren's body inside a silver vehicle. Police cordoned off the crime scene and initiated a nationwide manhunt for Melvin. Authorities had been repeatedly warned that he posed a danger to Lauren, but by the time they acted, it was too late. Now, their only focus was capturing her killer, Melvin. At this time, Melvin was still on the run. He rushed into Trinity Church in Salt Lake City to seek refuge. Police followed him into the building. They also knew that he had weapons and ready to fight back. They searched the church room by room until a single gunshot rang out. Melvin ended his life. When officers found him, the manhunt ended. However, the tragedy was far from over. Lauren, an innocent young woman, was murdered, causing people to demand clarity on the matter. Why had no one taken even the simplest measures to prevent this? How could someone who had pleaded for help and provided all the necessary information be so blatantly ignored? The university had failed to conduct even a basic background check on Melvin. Why hadn't they done so? If they had looked into his history and contacted his probation officer, he will be sent back to prison soon. He has been incarcerated for violating the terms of his probation and has a history of making provocative statements during his parole hearings. When reporters asked Melvin's parole officer if he could have been sent back to prison, the officer made it clear Melvin would have been arrested immediately if the police department informed them of his actions. Officer Miguel Dasso has left the University of Utah Police Force to join the Logan Police Department. However, after his actions came to light, he was promptly fired. Under state obscenity laws, he faces charges for mishandling evidence and showing it to another officer. These charges were later dropped because a data analysis of his phone showed insufficient evidence. Although the charges were dismissed, his actions caused significant harm. What is particularly troubling is that the district attorney has decided not to proceed with the case against him. The case also raises questions about where Melvin got the gun he used. As a parolee and convicted felon, he was legally prohibited from purchasing or possessing a firearm. Investigations revealed that he acquired the gun through a friend, who was also a convicted felon. The friend had his girlfriend purchase the gun on Melvin's behalf. If the gun had not been handed to Lauren would likely still be alive. The McCluskey family sued the University of Utah and its police force, accusing them of being irresponsible and incompetent in handling Lauren's request for help. The lawsuits, initially seeking $56 million, were resolved through settlements.